My name is Diana, and as I grew up, I was the princess of a castle. I barely comprehended the wealth my parents possessed. Bless their souls, they had more money than some countries. However, they ensured I understood the value of every penny. Money talks, but wisdom listens, Dad would say, while Mom insisted I learn how to budget before I could properly spell. Luxury life was a fairy tale until it wasn't. At the age of 12, their private jet crashed, turning my fairy tale into a stark reality overnight. Grandma took me in, and we lived in a modest house far removed from the opulence I was accustomed to. It was a different kind of life, where luxury was found in love and care rather than material things. My inheritance was a distant promise, locked away until I turned 25. So, I adapted, learned, and thrived under Grandma's guidance. College became my escape and grounding, and that's where Alex came into the picture. He was as far from my world as one could get, a scholarship kid with a heart of gold and a wit that could cut through any pretense. We clicked in a way I never expected. Bringing him home to meet Grandma was a nerve-wracking experience. I hadn't told him about the money. Better he doesn't know, not yet, Grandma had advised, and I saw the wisdom in her words. I wanted Alex to love me for me, not my bank account. Grandma, this is Alex. I introduced them, my stomach in knots. Nice to meet you, ma'am, Alex said, extending a hand that Grandma shook warmly. Sit, sit. Grandma gestured, her eyes twinkling as she took in Alex's nervous posture. You're the young man who's stolen my granddaughter's heart, she said. Alex blushed, a sheepish grin spreading across his face. Aita, I guess you could say that, ma'am. We sat down, and the conversation flowed more easily than I dared hope. Grandma shared stories of my parents, of me as a child, stories that made Alex laugh and look at me with a warmth that made my heart swell. You've got a good one here, Grandma, he said, nodding towards me but looking at Alex. Takes after her mother, strong and kind. But don't let her fool you. She's got a bit of mischief in her too. Alex chuckled, squeezing my hand under the table. The evening went on, filled with laughter and shared stories. Alex fit into our world like he was always meant to be there. As he helped Grandma with the dishes afterward, I knew I had made the right choice in bringing him into this part of my life. Walking him out later, Alex turned to me, a serious look on his face. Your grandma's amazing, you know? Hearing about your parents, your life, I feel like I understand you more, he said. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. I'm glad, Alex. There's a lot to me more than meets the eye, I guess. He smiled, pulling me into a hug. I'm here for all of it, every layer. Doesn't matter what's in your bank account, it's you I care about. I hugged him back tighter than I ever had before. In that moment, I knew I could trust him. But I also knew the weight of the secret I was keeping. It was a delicate balance, one I hoped wouldn't tip and spill over. The ride to Alex's parents' house was a quiet one, filled with the kind of silence that's too thick to cut through. I could tell Alex was nervous, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. You sure you're ready for this? I asked, trying to break the ice. Yeah, just, my mom can be a bit much. Don't take anything she says to heart, okay? Alex's attempt at a reassuring smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The house loomed ahead, grand and imposing. As we pulled up, my stomach twisted into knots. This was it, no turning back now. We were barely through the door when Alex's mom, Gloria, made her entrance. Her eyes landed on me like two laser beams, sizing me up in a way that made my skin crawl. So, this is the girl you've been hiding, she said, her voice as cold as the marble floors. Mom, this is Alex, began Alex, but Gloria waved him off. I know who she is. Come, let's sit. I prepared some tea. Her command was not to be ignored, leading us into a living room that felt more like a showroom. The tea was served, and Gloria wasted no time. I hear you were raised by your grandmother. Must have been quite the humble upbringing, she said, the word humble sounding more like an insult. I clenched my jaw, fighting to keep my cool. My grandma taught me a lot about life, Important stuff, not just fluff, I retorted. Gloria's lips twitched in a smirk. I see. And your parents. Gone too soon, I heard. Tragic, really. How does one cope without the proper guidance? Alex jumped in, clearly uncomfortable. Mom, that's enough. Let's not. No, it's okay, Alex. I interrupted, feeling a surge of defiance. Yeah, my folks are gone, and yeah, it was tough. But I got through it. Made me who I am. Gloria sipped her tea, her gaze never wavering. Interesting. And what about your future, dear? Any plans? Or are you just riding along on my son's coattails? That stung. I took a deep breath, reminding myself why I was here. I've got plans, big ones, and I don't need to ride on anyone's coattails to make them happen. The air was thick with tension. Alex, bless him, tried to change the subject. Mom, let's not do this, okay? We're here to enjoy each other's company, he interjected. Gloria set down her teacup, a calculated move. I'm merely trying to understand the woman my son has chosen. You can't fault a mother for caring about her child's future. The back and forth felt endless, a verbal tug-of-war where no one was winning. Just when I thought I couldn't take any more, Alex's sister Lily made her entrance. Her eyes were curious but held an edge of judgment that matched her mother's. So, you're the famous girlfriend. Heard a lot about you, not all good. I might add, Lily said, her voice dripping with disdain. I was about to snap back when Alex stood up. That's enough, both of you. We came here in good faith to share a part of our lives with you. If that's not something you can respect, then maybe we should leave. The rest of the visit was awkward, to say the least. Conversations felt forced, every laugh a little too loud. But Alex held my hand under the table, a silent promise that we were in this together. As we left, I couldn't help but feel a mix of relief and frustration. I'm sorry about that, Alex said once we were in the car. They can be a bit intense. I sighed, watching the lights of the house fade in the rearview mirror. It's not your fault, but man, your mom and sister, there's something else. Alex chuckled, a sad sort of sound. Yeah, they are. But hey, we survived, right? Survived and stronger, he said, agreeing. The wedding planning sailed smoothly enough, but the big day itself, that's when the storm hit. Lily, the sister-in-law-to-be, got soused beyond belief and decided it was showtime. In the middle of our reception, she staggered up, glass in hand, and slurred out accusations loud enough for the back row to hear. This one's a gold digger, doesn't know the first thing about our kind of life, illiterate, trying to snag my brother's cash. After that, there were other antics, molesting guests and other things that are not customary to talk about in decent society. I felt my face flush hot with anger and humiliation. Without a second thought, I pulled out my phone and called the cops. This drama needed an audience, and I wasn't about to let Lily's performance go unchecked. The aftermath was a hurricane of accusations and threats. Gloria avowed revenge for the disgrace I'd brought upon their family. You've made a mockery of us. The press will have a field day with my daughter's antics, thanks to you. Gloria seethed. Alex was torn, trying to play peacemaker in a war that had no room for neutrality. I saw the strain in his eyes, the way his shoulders sagged under the weight of his family's drama, and his desire to keep us afloat. But I stood my ground, my resolve hardening. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about drawing a line, about not letting wealth or the lack thereof dictate how I was treated. As the dust settled and the night grew quiet, Alex and I sat amidst the wreckage of what was supposed to be our happiest day. I'm sorry, he whispered, his voice heavy with unshed tears. I never wanted any of this. I took his hand, feeling the rough edges of our new reality. We'll get through this, but things need to change, starting with setting boundaries with your family. The vow we made that night wasn't just about staying together. It was about fighting for the respect we deserved, about not letting old money or old grudges define our future. 2 years slipped by since we said I do, and those vows felt heavier every day. Gloria practically vanished from our lives, and honestly, I didn't miss her one bit. But it wasn't just her absence that marked those years. It was Alex's changing attitude that really drove the wedge between us. He'd come home late if at all, muttering excuses about work that didn't quite add up. The warmth we once shared cooled into courtesy, and then even that faded. The tipping point came one night when he threw his jacket on the chair like it had personally offended him and said something I never thought I'd hear. You know, I could have done better, married someone with a bit more class, more in line with my circle. His words stung like a slap. I stood there gobsmacked, wanting to scream, to tell him about the fortune that was mine. But Grandma's voice echoed in my head, advising patience to see Alex for who he truly was. So I swallowed the truth and the hurt, biting back tears. I thought maybe, just maybe, if we had a child, it might bridge the gap between us, remind him of the love that brought us together. Alex, don't you think it's time we thought about having a baby? It could bring us closer. I ventured one evening, hoping to spark something of the man I fell in love with. His reaction was like a cold shower. A baby now? Don't be ridiculous. We're not ready for that, not by a long shot. That conversation shut me down. It wasn't just the refusal. It was the disdain, the way he made it clear that what I wanted, what I thought could save us, was nothing but a foolish fantasy. Days turned into weeks, and those weeks into months of silence, of living side by side, but not together. Each rude remark, every late night, added another brick to the wall between us. I confided in Grandma, pouring my heart out over cups of tea that had gone cold before I could finish them. He's not the man I married, Grandma. I don't know if he ever was, I admitted. She listened, her eyes sad but understanding. You can't make someone be who you want them to be, darling. Sometimes we see what we want to see until we can't ignore the truth any longer, she said. Her words, though heavy, carried a sliver of relief. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't asking for too much. I just wanted a partner, someone who saw me as an equal, who respected me. But as the days passed, it became clearer that wasn't who Alex was, not anymore if he ever had been. The idea of leaving crossed my mind more times than I cared to admit, but every time it did, I pushed it away, hoping against hope that something would change, that the man I loved would find his way back to me. The vibe was set for a killer party. I'd gone all out for Alex's birthday bash, hoping to bring back a spark into what had turned into a pretty mundane marriage. No expense was spared, and the guest list was a who's who of our closest pals. Notably missing from the invite list were Gloria and Lily, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. Their drama was the last thing I needed ruining the night. Alex was in high spirits, soaking in the adoration and well wishes from everyone. For a moment, it felt like we were back in the honeymoon phase, all laughter and inside jokes. But that bubble burst the second Gloria and Lily crashed the party, uninvited but clearly expecting to be welcomed. Turns out Alex had gone behind my back and invited them, hoping to avoid any family fallout. Their presence turned the atmosphere tense. Lily, in true form, made a beeline for the booze, dressed in an outfit that screamed, "Look at me," and not in a good way. Gloria's snide remarks flew under the radar, each one a veiled jab at me or our marriage. As the night wore on, Lily's antics escalated, fueled by champagne and the need to be the center of attention. She started a rant about me not fitting into their family, how I was unworthy of their name. It was a mess, and Alex was nowhere to be found, too busy playing the good son to notice the circus unfolding. The climax of the evening was when Lily, a few sheets to the wind, decided to air out some dirty laundry, waving around some documents as she slurred out insults, each word a knife. The spectacle ended with her stumbling into the pool, documents flying everywhere. I rushed over, more out of curiosity than concern, and gathered the scattered papers. My heart sank as I pieced together what they were: divorce papers signed by Alex. It was like a punch to the gut, each signature a betrayal. I stood there numb as the reality of the situation washed over me. My husband, the man I had vowed to spend my life with, had decided our journey was over without so much as a word to me. The party around me faded into a blur as I clutched the documents. Alex's signature glaring up at me, confirming what I didn't want to believe. This wasn't just a party to remember. It was the end of everything I thought we had. In the aftermath of the pool incident, I sought clarity amidst the chaos. My heart pounded as I approached Alex, holding the soaked documents that had unwittingly unveiled a truth I was unprepared for. "Alex, what's this about?" I demanded, my voice stronger than I felt, thrusting the divorce papers toward him. Before he could respond, his mother interjected with a smugness that made my skin crawl. "Oh dear, looks like your little scheme didn't work out, did it? Alex is leaving you. Thought you could trap him with a baby for his money." I stared at Alex, searching his eyes for any sign of the man I married, but he couldn't meet my gaze. His silence was more telling than any words. With resignation, I signed the divorce papers. They were just a formality now, a closing chapter of a book I no longer wished to be part of. As the dust settled, Grandma approached, her presence a calming force. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes conveyed volumes of empathy, understanding, and unspoken support that bolstered my resolve. It was then she decided to reveal the truth, not just to me, but to everyone present. "She doesn't need any of your money," Grandma declared, her voice steady and strong. "In a month, she turns 25 and will inherit a fortune far beyond what you could imagine. She's been raised to value people over wealth, to seek out genuine connections rather than financial gain." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Gloria's face morphed from smugness to shock, then to a desperate kind of greed as she quickly began backpedaling, her apologies as transparent as they were insincere. Alex, too, seemed suddenly eager to rewrite the narrative, insisting his intentions were never to hurt me, that he was merely influenced by his mother. But it was too late. The veil had been lifted, revealing the stark reality of our relationship and the motivations behind it. I met their apologies with a quiet smile, not out of forgiveness, but out of an inner peace that came from understanding my worth independent of the wealth that awaited me. "You've shown me your true colors," I said, my voice imbued with a newfound strength. "As for surprises, well, I've prepared another one for you." At that moment, a loud honk echoed through the tension outside. A sleek luxury car rolled up to the gate, the one I had secretly bought for Alex as a surprise. The irony wasn't lost on me. I couldn't help a bitter laugh as I excused myself, stepping outside to confront the final act of this drama. There it was, the epitome of luxury on four wheels, a symbol of the love I thought we shared, now just another piece in the game of pretense and betrayal. Without a second thought, I slid into the driver's seat, the leather cool and unyielding beneath me. Much like my resolve, Grandma, ever my rock, joined me, her presence a silent testament to the strength and dignity that ran in our blood. Turning to face the house, I saw Alex and his mother at the door, their expressions a mix of confusion and awe. "Everything from now on goes through my lawyer," I called out to them, my voice clear and devoid of warmth as I drove away. "And don't worry about my stuff. I'll have a courier pick it up." Their faces, once smug and self-assured, now painted a picture of realization and loss, not just of the wealth they coveted. I turned the key, the car's engine purring to life, a sweet sound that promised freedom and new beginnings. Grandma and I shared a look, a silent agreement that this was the first step toward a future unburdened by deceit and manipulation. After the revelations and dramatic exits, the air seemed clearer, as if the truth had not only unveiled the greed and deceit, but also cleansed the path ahead. It wasn't long before the first test of my newfound resolve came knocking, or rather calling. The phone rang, its shrill tone slicing through the calm like a knife. On the other end was none other than Lily, her voice dripping with an unfamiliar sweetness. "Hey, I just wanted to, clear the air between us. We're practically the same age, right? We could be friends." I couldn't help but let out a short, disbelieving laugh. The contrast between this sugary tone and her usual disdain was stark. "Friends." I echoed the word, feeling it foreign. You mean like how friends don't badmouth each other at parties or try to humiliate them in front of everyone? There was a pause, a moment where I imagined I could hear the cogs turning in her head as she searched for a response. Well, water under the bridge and all that, she attempted feebly. Water into the pool, you mean? I shot back, unable to resist the jab. The silence that followed was telling. It was clear that my refusal to play along had derailed her plans. Fine, be that way, she snapped, her veneer of niceness crumbling away. You'll regret this. I hung up, feeling a mix of amusement and sadness. It was a stark reminder of the facades people wear and the lengths they'll go to when faced with the consequences of their actions. The temptation to retaliate was there, a nagging thought in the back of my mind. I posted a video on social media of her falling into the pool. It went viral like wildfire. Within an hour, 1,000 people had liked it. My sister-in-law was internet famous. She tried to call me, demanding I take it down, but I just blocked her. I was done with her fake sweetness and her nasty attitude. A week after that, my phone rang with a number I knew all too well. It was Gloria, her voice unnaturally sweet, offering an olive branch she hoped I'd grasp. Let's put the past behind us for Alex's sake. Can't we reconcile? She suggested, as if the wounds were mere scratches that could heal with a band-aid of words. No, Gloria, that ship has sailed, I replied, firm but not unkind. There was no anchor in my voice, just a resolute peace. I wish Alex well, but our paths are diverging. Not long after, Alex made his own attempts at a reunion. One morning, I found a bouquet of flowers at my doorstep, the card bearing a simple "I'm sorry, please come back" message. The sight of them sparked more anger than affection. Without a second thought, I tossed them into the trash. His efforts didn't stop there. He tried to visit, showing up unannounced with the hope of talking things through. But I wasn't the same person he left behind. His presence, once a source of comfort, now felt like an intrusion. One evening, as he made yet another uninvited appearance, I met him at the door with a resolve as hard as steel. If you don't stop this, I'm going to the police, I warned, my voice steady and firm. Your apologies can't undo what's been done. It's over, Alex, really over. The gravity of my words finally seemed to reach him. His shoulders slumped, and with a final lingering look, he turned and walked away. That was the last I saw of him. In the time that followed, I threw myself into charity work. It became my passion, my purpose. Helping those truly in need, connecting with people who valued kindness over wealth, brought me a joy I hadn't known was missing. Living with Grandma, I found peace in our quiet routine. We'd sit and plan our next project, our next way to make a difference. It was during these moments I realized this was where I was meant to be. I had no illusions about the road ahead. It would be fraught with challenges, perhaps even heartache. But I also knew it would be filled with joy, with moments of unbridled happiness, and the kind of love that enriches the soul. And so, I live my life looking forward, not back. I work, I help, and I hope. I believe in a future where all find true love, not defined by wealth or status, but by genuine connection. And yes, one day, I'll have those 3 beautiful children I dream of. But for now, I'm content. I'm building a life of purpose, surrounded by love that doesn't ask for anything in return. This isn't just the end of a chapter. It's the beginning of a whole new book, and I'm the one writing it. It's always locked, but it's open. Just wait a moment before I could stop her. My daughter opened the drawer. What, Mom, is this? The daughter became visibly disturbed immediately. I looked in as well, and there was a divorce application with a handwriting letter, clearly known by its unique quirks. When I picked it up, a photo slipped out. It showed my husband, a woman, and a boy about the same age as my daughter. On the back of the photo, along with the date, it read, "With my beloved." Seeing this, I immediately understood. Mom, does this mean Dad is cheating? Let's take this opportunity to clear things up once and for all. I smiled at my daughter and gave her instructions to tidy up. That day, we submitted the divorce application to the city court. Having tidied everything up cleanly, we decided to leave our home. I am Anna. I live with my husband and our daughter, a family of 3. I met my husband, Nathan, when I was 28 years old. I was working as an office clerk, and he was in sales. We started talking through work, and we both enjoyed drinking, so we began going out for drinks more often. Growing conscious of each other, after he confessed his feelings to me, we dated for 2 years before getting married. Things were going well for us. However, even a year after our marriage, we were not blessed with children. I wonder if not having kids is because of the alcohol. I complained to my husband. We both enjoyed drinking, so we had a habit of drinking before bed every night. My husband showed a complicated expression. I wonder, but drinking during pregnancy is not good, so let's quit. Once I'll quit with you. Thank you. I'm worried because of my age, so I'll go to the hospital too. If necessary, I'll come with you. My mother keeps nagging me to show her grandchildren. My husband laughed jokingly. I laughed back, but my feelings were complicated. My mother-in-law is not a bad person, but she is very eager for grandchildren. Anna, aren't you over 30? It gets harder to get pregnant after 30, you know. I'm worried. Ethan is an only child. The other day, Mrs. Morrison next door was flaunting her grandchild's photo. It's so annoying. Before we got married, she would say such things and sigh deeply. It was because of my mother-in-law that I started worrying about not being able to have children. She would call me without telling my husband, pressing for grandchildren. I thought it wasn't uncommon to be a first-time mother after 30 these days. However, being strongly pressed by my mother-in-law, I started to feel rushed. So I talked to my husband, and we started infertility treatments. My husband was supportive, willing to undergo fertility tests with me. Since both of us had no issues, we thought we would have a child soon. However, despite the accumulating treatment costs, I couldn't get pregnant. Gradually, my husband began to vent his frustration about not having a child. Why can't you get pregnant? There's no problem, right? Just get it over with. You're taking off work to go to the hospital too much. Think about me working at the same place. What can I do? I want a baby soon too. It's hard for me to ask for time off. It's not just about you. Then quit your job. Stress isn't good, right? We can get by on my earnings alone. My husband must have reached his limit. Just quit tomorrow. Anyway, missing one clerk won't cause any trouble, and the gap will be filled quickly. Wait, just like that? All of a sudden? Let's do that. I'm going to bed now since it's early tomorrow. Good night. Saying this, my husband forcefully ended the conversation, and under his pressure, I quit my job. My dream of being an independent woman was cut short there. But I do want children. It's fine to return to work after having a child. For now, let's focus on trying to conceive. I reconsidered and tried to stay positive. However, my hopes were gradually crushed. Hey, since you're not working, at least take care of the house properly. We don't even have kids. I'm sorry, the hospital was so crowded today. I couldn't come back earlier and microwaved pasta. Are you kidding me? Even when you were working, you managed to cook something decent. I'm sorry, I was just too tired. Asterisk sigh asterisk. I'm the one who's tired, working from morning till evening, and this is what I come back to. Forget it, I'll eat out today. Gradually, my husband became harsher towards me. I felt it was verbal abuse, yet feeling inferior because I had quit my job and was being supported by him. And without any results from our fertility efforts, I couldn't say anything. I spent my days walking on eggshells around my husband, who complained about the housework. This behavior did not change even in front of his mother, who, instead of reprimanding him, joined him in pressuring for grandchildren. The stress was more than when I was working. However, my wish was granted, and a year later, I became pregnant. It was unexplained infertility, but I was so glad I didn't give up. On the day I found out about my pregnancy, I decided to buy flowers on my way back from the clinic. This will make him return to his kinder self. That's what I thought. But oh, that's great. Congratulations. His reaction was lukewarm. After all the talk about having children and quitting my job, I felt indignant. Still, I hoped things would change once the baby was born. Hey, clean up my study. And I don't need dinner today. I have a business trip coming up next week, so take care of the preparations. That's too much. I've been suffering from severe morning sickness and can't eat anything. Everyone goes through that, right? Normally, you'd be working, so you should at least be able to do that much. Leaving those words, my husband went off to work while I struggled with more morning sickness, trying to do as he said. During this time, I gave birth to our daughter, Nicole. The only thing that changed was that the calls from my mother-in-law for grandchildren stopped. However, she would still suddenly show up wanting to see her granddaughter. But as long as she cared for Nicole, I could bear it. But my husband's verbal abuse continued. While I was busy caring for Nicole, he would leave the household responsibilities to me and go out to drink freely. His late nights out and unauthorized overnight stays increased. You know you're being supported by me, so you should take care of the house and Nicole. Do you think you can live on your own with a child, unable to even keep a job? No way. My husband would come home drunk and hurl such insults at me repeatedly. All I could do was care for Nicole and listen. Hearing his verbal abuse over and over, I started to believe I couldn't divorce him, thinking I wouldn't be able to raise my daughter on my own. However, as Nicole grew, I began to feel a sense of urgency. When my husband started to get angry as usual, Nicole said, "Mom," apologized quickly. She thought that would calm my husband's anger quickly, and she was right. When I apologized, he would click his tongue and leave the room. Seeing my daughter Nicole always being considerate of her irritable father broke my heart. I finally started to consider divorce. This situation isn't good for our daughter's upbringing. I decided to start working part-time in secret, thinking of saving money for after the divorce. But I didn't know what my husband, Ethan, would say if I told him I was starting a job. So I began working as a cashier at a supermarket during the mornings when Nicole was at school, making sure not to neglect the household chores to avoid complaints from my husband. Time passed, and Nicole reached the 6th grade of elementary school. I told her about the divorce plan before she started middle school. She seemed relieved. "I'm glad we can finally get away. I'm sorry for making it tough on you, but everything will be okay now. I've saved up enough money." Overwhelmed with emotion, Nicole and I hugged each other. "We'll be free soon." That's what I thought until one day. "Hey, tidy up my study." That day, Nicole was off school, and Ethan was supposed to be off work as well. However, "I'm going on a business trip starting today. I won't be back for a week." He said this and left the house with a large suitcase. It was common for him to suddenly leave for business trips. Nicole and I watched him leave as usual and then started to tidy up his study. Why doesn't Dad clean up his room? It's too messy, really. He's made me do it for so long. He probably can't do it himself anymore. The worst, but we're getting divorced, right? We can get away. Just a bit more patience. Saying this, Nicole started picking up her father's clothes with a determined gesture. When I began tidying the desk and its surrounding papers, I noticed something unusual. The desk drawer, usually locked, was open. "Oh," as I said this, Nicole came over to see what was up. "Ah, it's usually locked, but it's open." "Oh, just wait a moment." Before I could stop her, Nicole opened the drawer. "What, Mom, is this?" She became visibly disturbed immediately. I looked in as well, and there it was. A divorce application with a handwriting letter, clearly known by its unique quirks. When I picked it up, a photo slipped out. "Dad, and who is this?" It showed Ethan, a woman, and a boy about the same age as Nicole. On the back of the photo, along with a date, it read, "With my beloved." Realizing the implication, I quickly understood. Nicole, possibly grasping the situation, looked up at me anxiously. "Mom, does this mean Dad is cheating?" "It seems so, but this might actually be for the best." "What?" "Let's take this chance to clean the slate completely." I smiled at Nicole and gave her instructions to tidy up. After finishing the cleanup, we decided to leave our home, packing only the essentials and arranging for a moving company to handle the rest. We moved into a short-stay apartment while searching for a place to live permanently. That day, we submitted the divorce application to the city court. From that day on, Ethan felt like an ex-husband to me. I considered hiring a detective agency, but wanting to save money for the future, I decided to look for evidence of the affair myself. My ex-husband underestimated me as I found evidence quickly. A simple search of his name brought up his social media, documenting trips in daily life, but not with me as the partner. There were also many videos and photos left on his computer, perhaps to save space on his phone. It was undeniable proof of the affair. Based on this, I sought legal advice. Then, on the day my ex-husband was supposed to return from his business trip, I received a call. "Hello? What the hell is this? What do you mean there's nothing left in the house? What did you do?" "You told me to tidy up, so I did." "Stop joking and come back. Where are you?" "I won't be returning. I'm divorcing you." "What? Why?" "You have the nerve to ask. Cheating and starting another family, and you don't know why." "How did you find out?" "You've been pretending to be on business trips. I've seen everything on your social media and computer. I even found out about the other home you have, all thanks to her parents, right?" Ethan was clearly shocked to learn how much I knew. "You were careless. You didn't think I would do something like this, did you? You'll struggle without me. How will you manage financially? A woman like you can't survive on her own." "Maybe, but it's better than staying with an abusive husband like you. I'll be taking compensation and child support from you. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on. Goodbye." I hung up. My ex-husband tried calling several times, but I blocked him. Even my mother-in-law reached out. A good wife forgives her husband's affairs. Don't make such a fuss and come back home. Forgive an affair and abuse with a son about my daughter's age? I can't do that. I won't be in contact with you or let you see my daughter. That's ridiculous. Even if you divorce, she's still my daughter. You can't take her away. This is also what my daughter wants. She suffered because of her father and doesn't want to see you either. That's absurd. Goodbye. I continued to block calls from her, feeling relieved to be rid of unnecessary burdens. I found a modest apartment for our next home and moved our belongings there. Despite using a significant portion of my funds, I felt relieved about starting anew. After moving, I initiated claims for compensation against my ex-husband. Initially resistant, my ex-husband quickly signed the documents when I mentioned returning to my previous job, which is also his workplace. Please don't do that. It'll ruin my reputation. My previous workplace is also my ex-husband's workplace. He must have realized it was only a matter of time before it became known. He signed out of self-preservation, agreeing to a lump sum payment. Then, through the lawyer, the mistress requested to meet. It seems she's quite remorseful. She wants to apologize in person. Persuaded by the lawyer's words, I agreed to meet. I chose a cafe as the meeting place. The woman who appeared was well-dressed and beautiful. "Nice to meet you. My name is Tracy Brown. I sincerely apologize for the trouble I've caused." "Nice to meet you." An awkward silence filled the air. I had no intention of forgiving her, but I was curious about her side of the story. She began to speak slowly, revealing that she initially thought he was single. When she discovered she was pregnant, Ethan confessed he was married but promised a swift divorce. However, soon after her pregnancy came to light, he told her a divorce was no longer possible. Then her parents suggested she could still have a family with him. Able to cut ties with Ethan, she accepted her parents' proposal. In reality, we were not divorced, and the marriage registration we submitted was never processed. "So, you've been with my husband for over 12 years? "Yes. He had told me he divorced 10 years ago, but I continued the relationship for 3 years even after knowing about you. I am truly sorry. Now I've decided to end things with Ethan. I loved him, but I've realized I was just convenient for him." "How so?" "The moment he knew you found out, he started treating me like a cash cow." My parents are quite generous with me, their only child, and he depended on that. Our life was largely supported by my parents, and his lies became unforgivable. I see. And this is the compensation from my parents. She handed me a white envelope. I silently accepted it. She apologized until the end and then left. Perhaps she too was fooled by a foolish man. Afterwards, my daughter and I started a new life. When I explained my situation to my part-time job, they offered me a full-time position. Nicole no longer had to tiptoe around an adult's mood at home and seemed to smile more. I too have begun to feel more at peace. What would you like for dinner tonight? I want an omelette. Great idea. All right, love you, Nicole. With ketchup in. All right, love you, Mom. We spent the evening laughing together, planning to live for each other's happiness moving forward. I settled onto the worn-out couch, a piece of furniture that once echoed with tales of laughter and late-night movies. Now it stood as a mere relic in a room steeped in memories of a happier past. Upstairs, my 3-year-old, Sophie, slumbered peacefully, her gentle breaths providing a stark contrast to the somber atmosphere below. Glancing at the clock once more, well past 10 p.m., I couldn't shake the sense of anticipation. Mark, my husband, was running late again, a routine that had become the new norm. The familiar sound of the key finally turning in the lock shattered the prevailing silence. I rose, instinctively smoothing my shirt, a habit that seemed futile in the face of our strained relationship. Mark, I called out as he entered, looking more like a stranger than the man I had married. You're late. He didn't meet my eyes, offering only a grunt in response. Work. It's always work, he mumbled, his once warm and affectionate voice now carrying a cold, distant tone. I tried to maintain a casual tone, mentioning Sophie's inquiries about him earlier in the day. She asked about you today, wondering when Daddy would be home. He shrugged off his coat carelessly, hanging it on the rack. Kids ask a lot of things. Doesn't mean we always have answers. A pang of pain shot through my heart. Maybe we could do something this weekend, just the 3 of us. Sophie would love that. Mark snorted, his tone laced with sarcasm. A family outing with everything that's going on. Don't be naive, Lily. My hands trembled slightly. This wasn't the man I fell in love with. It's important, Mark. She needs her father. He walked to the fridge, pulling out a beer. What she needs is a miracle, not me playing pretend in a park. I couldn't hold back my tears. She's your daughter, Mark. How can you be so cold? He took a swig of his beer, avoiding my gaze. I'm being realistic, Lily. This isn't the life I wanted. A sick child, a house that feels more like a hospital. I followed him into the kitchen, my voice rising. And what about me? Do you think I enjoy watching our daughter suffer? Do you think this is the life I dreamed of? Mark slammed the beer bottle on the counter. I don't know, Lily. I really don't. But I know I can't do this anymore. Anger surged within me. You want to walk away from your own child? He drained his beer in one gulp. I need space. I can't deal with this suffocation. Suffocation, I echoed in disbelief. Is that what your family is to you now? Mark turned away, his shoulders tense. It's not just that. It's everything. The constant hospital visits, the medical bills, the way our lives revolve around Sophie's illness. I didn't sign up for this. I was at a loss for words, contemplating how our once loving relationship had devolved into this bitter reality. Mark didn't answer my question about his plans. Instead, he walked past me, his footsteps resonating heavily on the wooden floor. I stood there, a whirlwind of emotions churning inside me, anger, sadness, and a profound sense of betrayal. Later, as I lay in bed with the space next to me cold and empty, I listened to the distant sound of Mark's TV from the other room. The divide between us had grown too vast to bridge. The man I married, the father of my child, was now a stranger under the same roof. The hospital room presented a stark and clinical contrast to the warm and familiar feel of our home. Sophie lay in the small bed, her tiny chest rising and falling steadily. I sat beside her, holding her small hand, attempting to draw strength from her innocent slumber. Nurse Janet walked in, her face masked with professional kindness. "How's our brave girl doing today, Lily?" I managed a weary smile, replying, "She's a fighter, always has been." Janet checked Sophie's vitals, her movements efficient and gentle. "She's in good hands here. The surgery team is one of the best." I nodded, my throat tight with unspoken fears. "I just wish Mark could be here more. She keeps asking for him." Janet gave me a sympathetic look. "Fathers often find it hard to cope with these situations, but you're doing an amazing job." Sighing, I felt the weight of loneliness. It's hard doing it alone, you know. He's just not the same anymore. As if on cue, Mark walked in, his arrival less comforting than I had hoped. He glanced at Sophie and then at me, his expression unreadable. "How is she?" I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. He fiddled with his phone, avoiding eye contact. "I can't stay long. Work's crazy." Anger flashed within me. "Work? Because that's what's important right now?" Mark looked up, his eyes cold. "What do you want from me, Lily? To sit here and watch her sleep?" I bit back a retort, focusing on Sophie instead. "She asked for you today, Mark. She misses her dad." He shrugged off his detachment like a physical barrier. "I'm here, Rabbi?" Before I could respond, Sophie stirred, her little voice weak but clear. "Daddy." Mark's face softened momentarily as he moved closer to her. "Hey, princess, Daddy's here." Sophie smiled faintly, reaching out for him. "Stay with me, Daddy." I watched with a mix of hope and sorrow in my heart as Mark hesitated, then sat on the edge of the bed. "I can't stay long, Sophie. Daddy has to work." Her smile faded, a look of understanding far beyond her years in her eyes. "It's okay, Daddy. I love you." Mark forced a smile, patting her hand. "I love you too, kiddo." As he stood to leave, I felt a surge of resentment. "She needs you, Mark. We need you." He paused, his back to us. "I'm doing what I can, Lily." His words rang hollow in the sterile room as I watched him leave, a familiar sense of abandonment settling over me. Sophie's hand gripped mine, her small presence a reminder of the fight ahead of us. That was brewing just beyond their sight. The room fell silent again, save for the beeping of the monitors in Sophie's hospital room. Leaning closer to Sophie, I whispered promises of better days, promises I wasn't sure I could keep. In that moment, all I had was hope and the unwavering love for my daughter. The silence was shattered by a call from my friend Lisa, a realtor at a local company, in the dimly lit hospital cafeteria, clutching a lukewarm cup of coffee. I sat, my mind swirling with betrayal and shock. Mark was selling our house, our home. Anger and disbelief fueled a determination I hadn't felt in months. Lisa slid into the seat across from me, her expression a mix of concern and anger. "I can't believe he's doing this, Lily, selling your house while you're here with Sophie." Taking a deep breath, I tried to steady my shaking hands. "I need you to delay the sale, Lisa. Buy me some time." Lisa nodded, her eyes firm. "I'll do what I can, but we don't have much time. He's pushing for a quick sale." Leaning forward, my voice low and firm, I declared, "I won't let him get away with this. He thinks he can just steal my house and run off with whoever she is." Lisa reached out, gripping my hand. "Do you have a plan?" The word echoed in my mind. I had been reactive for too long, letting life and Mark's indifference dictate my days. But not anymore. I'm going to fight back. I'll start by talking to a lawyer. There has to be a way to stop this. Lisa's expression shifted to one of support. "Good. You fight this, Lily, and I'm here every step of the way." Feeling a spark of resolve, I added, "And I'll need to gather evidence, proof of his betrayal, the fraud, anything that can help my case. Let's start with the house sale." Lisa suggested, "I'll dig up everything I can on the buyer, the deal, anything out of the ordinary." Sipping my bitter coffee, I remarked, "I can't believe he's doing this to me, to Sophie, after everything we've been through." Lisa's hand tightened around mine. "He's a coward, Lily, and he's going to regret underestimating you." Standing up, my resolve strengthening, I declared, He's going to pay for this, Lisa. He's going to pay for hurting my daughter, for trying to take away our home. I'll make sure of it. Lisa stood with me, her eyes fierce. Let's do this, Lily. Let's show him he picked the wrong woman to mess with. Hidden from view, I stood just outside the realtor's office, my heart racing through the slightly ajar door. I could hear the voices inside. Mark's smooth and confident tone as he spoke to potential buyers. And she was there too, his mistress, her laughter oblivious to the storm that was brewing just beyond their sight. She was a part of it. I watched as Mark handed over a stack of papers to the buyers, his charm on full display, the same charm that had once swept me off my feet. This is a fantastic opportunity, he declared. A beautiful house, great location. You're getting a steal. The buyers, a middle-aged couple, nodded with expressions a mix of eagerness and caution. The wife leafed through the documents, her husband leaning over to inspect. It all seems in order, she murmured. Mark's mistress, a young woman with bright red lipstick, laughed and leaned closer to Mark. Told you it would be easy, she whispered, loud enough for me to hear. A surge of anger welled up within me, but I forced myself to stay put. This was about gathering evidence, understanding the depth of Mark's deceit. The husband looked up, a question in his eyes. And the current owner? She's agreed to all this? Mark's response was swift, a lie so smooth it sounded like truth. Absolutely, she's moved on, wants to sell the place quickly. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. How could he lie so blatantly? The audacity of it made my blood boil. Lisa, who was playing her part in my game, intervened. We can proceed with the sale as soon as you're ready. The couple exchanged a look, then nodded. We're ready. This is a deal we don't want to miss. I watched as they began to sign the papers, the finality of each stroke feeling like a dagger in my heart. But I needed to stay focused. This was not the time for emotions. It was the time for action. Mark's laughter brought me back to the moment. He was toasting with the buyers, his mistress clinging to his arm. To new beginnings, he said, raising his glass. I stepped into the room, my gaze fixed on Mark. Enjoying yourself, Mark? Everyone turned, shock and confusion on their faces. Mark's smile faltered. Lily, what are you doing here? I walked up to them, my steps firm. I'm here to stop you from making the biggest mistake of your life, Mark. His scoff and his mistress rolling her eyes didn't deter me. What are you talking about? The deal is done, she said. I smiled, but it was cold, devoid of any warmth. Is it now? Because I don't remember signing off on selling my house. The buyers looked uncomfortable, exchanging glances. We were told everything was in order, the husband said, his voice uncertain. Mark stepped forward, trying to assert control. Lily, you're confused. This is for the best. I shook my head. No, Mark. The only confusion here is yours if you think you can forge my signature and get away with it. The room went silent. Mark's face turned a shade paler. You can't prove anything, he blurted out. I pulled out a set of documents from my bag. Actually, I can, and I have. These are the real papers. The ones you have are lies. Mark's mistress tugged at his arm. Mark, what's she talking about? Tell me this isn't true. But Mark was speechless. His usual confidence shattered. That's when the door opened, and 2 police officers walked in. One of the officers looked directly at Mark. Mark Johnson, you're under arrest for fraud and forgery. Mark's face drained of color. He looked at me, his eyes filled with disbelief. You called the cops. I met his gaze, my voice steady. Yes, I did. You broke the law, Mark, and you tried to steal my home. As the officers handcuffed Mark, his mistress started to cry, her makeup smearing. The buyers quickly gathered their things, eager to distance themselves from the situation. One of the officers turned to me. We'll meet your statement, ma'am. I nodded, feeling a sense of justice. Of course, officer. As they led Mark away, he looked back at me, his expression a mix of anger and regret. But I felt no sympathy. He had made his choice, and now he was facing the consequences. Lisa smiled at me, nodding her head approvingly. I smiled back and left the office, A weight lifted off my shoulders. I had stood up for myself and Sophie. I had fought back, and this was just the beginning. After Mark's arrest, I found myself in the lawyer's office, surrounded by law books, the air heavy with the scent of leather. Mr. Thompson, my lawyer, was a no-nonsense man in his 50s, his face etched with lines of experience. He glanced at the file in front of him. "Lily, your husband's actions have opened up a big can of worms. The fraud charge is serious." I sat across from him, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. "I know, Mr. Thompson, but I couldn't let him get away with it, not after everything." Mr. Thompson nodded, understanding in his eyes. "I respect that. Now, about the divorce and custody battle. You're in a strong position, but it won't be easy." I leaned forward. "I'm ready for it. I have to do this for Sophie. She deserves a stable home." The lawyer shuffled some papers. "What about alimony and child support? Given Mark's incarceration, it's going to be complicated." I sighed, a mix of determination and sadness in my voice. "I want what's fair for Sophie. She's my priority. As for Mark, he made his choices." Mr. Thompson looked at me, his expression serious. "You're a strong woman, Lily. We'll fight for what's right for you and your daughter." As I left the office, my phone rang. It was Mark. I hesitated but answered. "What do you want, Mark?" His voice came through, laced with desperation. "Lily, please. I messed up. I know that. But don't take Sophie away from me." I stopped in my tracks, anger rising. "You thought about Sophie when you tried to sell our house, when you spent your days with that woman." He was silent for a moment. "I lost my way, but I'm her father, Lily. I love her." I clenched my phone tighter. "Love isn't just words, Mark. It's actions. You failed us both." Mark's voice cracked. "I'll do anything to make it right. Please, Lily." I shook my head, even though he couldn't see me. "It's too late for that. You'll see Sophie, but only under supervised visits. That's non-negotiable." There was a pause, then a soft, defeated sigh from Mark. "Okay, I understand." The days were a whirlwind. I spent most of my time with Sophie, ensuring she felt loved and secure amidst the chaos. Her laughter was a balm to my wounded heart. One afternoon, while Sophie napped, I received a call from my sister Laura. "Hey, Lily, how are you holding up?" Laura's voice was always a mix of concern and strength. I sighed, staring out the window. "It's tough, but I'm getting through it." Laura was silent for a moment. "I heard about Mark. I'm so sorry, Lily, but I'm proud of you for standing up to him." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, Laura. It's hard, but I have to be strong for Sophie. She needs me now more than ever." Laura's voice softened. "And what about you? Who's being strong for Lily?" Her question caught me off guard. I had been so focused on Sophie and the legal battle that I hadn't given much thought to myself. I don't know, Laura. I guess I haven't had time to think about that." Laura was firm. "You need to take care of yourself too, Lily. You can't pour from an empty cup." I knew she was right. "I'll try, Laura. It's just everything feels overwhelming right now." "You're not alone, Lily. Remember that. I'm here for you always." The next day, I visited a therapist, Dr. Martin. His office was a small, cozy room with soft lighting and a comfortable couch. He greeted me with a warm smile. "Lily, it's good to meet you. How can I help you today?" I took a deep breath, unloading my worries and fears. "I just feel so lost, Dr. Martin. Everything I knew, everything I trusted, it's all been turned upside down." Dr. Martin nodded, his voice gentle. "It's understandable to feel that way after what you've been through. But it's important to remember that this is a chapter in your life, not the whole story." His words resonated with me. Over the next few weeks, I started to take small steps towards reclaiming my life. I joined a support group for single parents. The first meeting was daunting, but as I listened to others share their stories, I realized I wasn't alone. "Welcome, Lily," said the group leader, a kind woman named Beth. "We're here to support each other, to share our struggles and our victories." I shared my story, my voice steady but filled with emotion. The group listened, their faces a tapestry of empathy and understanding. After the meeting, a woman named Sarah approached me. "Your story is inspiring, Lily. You're stronger than you realize." Her words lifted my spirits. Maybe I was stronger than I thought. Maybe, just maybe, I could turn this painful chapter into a story of resilience and hope. Sitting in my living room, the early morning light filtering through the curtains, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had led to this moment of tranquility. The divorce papers, now signed and finalized, lay on the coffee table, a testament to my newfound independence. The legal battle had been long and arduous. I had sued Mark for a substantial portion of his property, determined to secure a stable future for Sophie and myself. The court's decision had been in our favor. Mark, now serving a real sentence for his fraudulent activities, had lost much of what he had once held dear. His mistress, caught in the web of deceit, was slapped with a hefty fine payable to me as restitution. I remembered sitting in the courtroom, watching Mark and his mistress turn on each other, each trying to deflect blame. There was no love lost between them, only bitter accusations and desperate attempts to save themselves. Watching them, I felt a sense of satisfaction. They had gotten what they deserved. Their betrayal and greed had led them to this downfall. But amidst the chaos of legal proceedings and emotional upheavals, there was a silver lining. Sophie, my brave little girl, had made a swift recovery after her surgery. Her laughter and energy filled our home with a warmth that had been missing for far too long. As I sipped my morning coffee, I thought about our future. It was a future I had fought hard for, a future that seemed bright and promising. Sophie was my priority, my beacon of hope. Together, we had weathered a storm and emerged stronger. I glanced at the pictures on the mantel, images of Sophie and me at the park, at the zoo, smiling and carefree. They were more than just photographs. They were reminders of our resilience, our ability to find joy amidst adversity. Sophie bounded into the room, her hair a tousled mess, her eyes bright with excitement. "Mommy, are we going to the park today?" I smiled, my heart swelling with love. "Yes, sweetheart, we're going to have a great day." She clapped her hands, her laughter echoing through the room. Yay, I love the park. As I watched her play, I realized that this was what mattered the most. The struggles, the pain, and the betrayal were behind us. What lay ahead was a path of healing and new adventures. In the hushed confines of our home, the echoes of memories featuring Amy, our sole daughter, reverberated against the walls. She was always more firecracker than flower, consistently pushing boundaries and testing limits. As a dentist, I've encountered my share of pain, but nothing quite compares to the ache of a child pulling away. My husband, John, a seasoned cop, always had a knack for smoothing things over. But even he was at a loss when Amy packed up and left with that rock musician, her teenage rebellion reaching its peak. "How did we end up here, John?" I asked one evening, my gaze fixed on the empty chair that Amy once occupied at our dinner table. One day she's sneaking out to concerts, the next she's gone without a trace. John sighed, his eyes reflecting the weight of the same unanswered questions. "She's always been wild, Martha, like a storm you can't predict or tame, but she's still our girl." Yet, as days turned into months with nothing but silence from Amy, the burden of her absence grew heavier. It wasn't until a photograph arrived in our mailbox that we saw her again, not in person, but in a wedding picture, defiantly happy beside a man adorned with tattoos and a guitar. There was no invitation, no call, just a snapshot of the life she chose over us. I remember my hands trembling as I held the photo, the hurt palpable between us. "She's made her choice, hasn't she, John?" I whispered, the sting of rejection still fresh. John tried to calm the storm brewing within me. "Maybe she's trying to reach out in her own way, Martha. It's a start, right?" But his words did little to soothe the ache of rejection. We continued in our home, which felt larger and lonelier by the day. Work became a distraction, filling the void left by Amy's laughter and chaos. Months turned into a year with no word from Amy, and just when the silence seemed permanent, our computer signaled a Skype call. It was Amy. "Mom, Dad, I need your help," she said, her voice ragged with wear, her face filling the screen, different yet painfully familiar. John and I exchanged a glance, a silent conversation passing between us. "What's going on, Amy?" I asked, my heart pounding. She hesitated, her gaze flickering away before returning to the screen. It's a lot. I've got a baby now, a little girl, and things, well, they aren't great. I need money, Mom. 1,000 a month. John's brow furrowed, his cop instincts on alert. "Slow down, Amy. Why do you need the money?" She bit her lip, a nervous habit from childhood. "I just do, Dad. Please, I wouldn't ask if it wasn't serious." We sat in silence, the weight of her plea hanging heavy. Finally, I nodded, my decision firm despite the whirlwind of questions. "All right, Amy, we'll help. But please talk to us. What's been happening?" Tears traced her cheeks as she looked down. "I can't. Not now. Just thank you. This means everything." The call ended abruptly, leaving John and me staring at a blank screen. "What do you think, John? Did we just make a mistake?" I murmured, doubt creeping in. He shook his head, his hand finding mine. "No, Martha. She's our daughter, and she's in trouble. It's our job to help, no questions asked." "But a grandchild, John. A whole year, and she's kept this from us. What else don't we know?" I couldn't keep the tremble from my voice. "We'll find out, love. For now, let's just be there for her however she'll let us," he replied, his voice a steady anchor in the storm. The days that followed blurred into a whirlwind of bank transfers and uneasy silence. I kept myself busy at the clinic, grateful for the distraction it provided. But every time I came home, I half expected Amy to be there waiting with her child. But the house remained quiet, our lives suspended in a state of waiting and worry. One evening, as we sat in the living room, the air thick with unsaid fears, John broke the silence. "She'll reach out again, Martha, when she's ready," he said. I nodded, clinging to his optimism like a lifeline. "I hope you're right. I want to hold my grandchild, to tell Amy it's going to be okay." "We will, Martha? We will," he'd assured me, though I saw the shadow of his own doubts flickering in his eyes. I whispered a silent prayer for my daughter and granddaughter, wherever they were. The plea had opened old wounds and new fears, but it had also rekindled the flame of hope. We were still a family, fractured and distant, but connected by unbreakable bonds of love and the unwavering promise to be there for each other, no matter what. It was one of those early mornings where the cold bites at your bones, the world outside frosted and still. John and I were nestled in the warmth of our home, sipping coffee, the silence comfortable if not a bit heavy with unspoken thoughts about Amy. That's when the sharp knock came, shattering the calm like a stone through glass. John and I exchanged the startled look, the same question in our eyes. Who could it be at this hour? He stood up, moving towards the door, while I followed close behind, a knot of worry tightening in my stomach. He swung the door open, and there on our doorstep was a sight that knocked the breath from me. Amy, thinner and more worn than I remembered, clutching a small bundle wrapped in blankets. Her eyes, red and swollen from crying, met mine, and it was as if the years of silence fell away in an instant. "Amy, oh my God, Amy!" I cried out, rushing forward to wrap her in an embrace, the cold forgotten. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. Can we come in?" Her voice was a whisper, hoarse and fragile. Of course, come in." John's voice was firm, guiding her gently inside as I quickly shut the door against the cold. Once inside, Amy unwrapped the bundle, revealing a tiny sleeping face, peaceful. "Despite the chaos, this is your granddaughter," she said, her voice breaking as tears streamed down my face. I looked at the baby, so innocent and unaware of the storm she'd been born into. "She's beautiful, Amy. What's her name?" Amy hesitated, a shadow crossing her face. "Lily. Her name's Lily." John, ever the practical one, sprung into action. "You both look frozen, Martha. Let's get them warmed up. I'll make some food." As I helped Amy out of her coat, the threadbare fabric and worn shoes didn't escape my notice. She was shivering, her body frail and tired. I'd ushered her to the living room, piling blankets around her and the baby. John brought in food, setting it before Amy, who ate with a hunger that spoke of too many missed meals. Lily, now awake, watched with wide, curious eyes, her little hand wrapped around my finger. Once Amy had eaten her fill, she looked up at us, her eyes holding a depth of pain and regret. I need to tell you everything. It's been so bad, worse than you can imagine. John and I sat, our hearts heavy with dread and love, ready to listen as she spoke. Her voice trembled with the weight of her story, each word painting a picture of a life unraveled, of dreams turned to nightmares. When she finally finished, the room was heavy with silence. I reached out, taking her hand in mine. "Amy, we're here now. You're safe, both of you?" I said. John nodded, his face set in a determined line. "We'll take care of you, whatever it takes." Amy broke down then, tears streaming down her face, a mix of relief and sorrow. "I'm so sorry. I was so stupid, so proud. I should have come back sooner." I pulled her into a hug, rocking her gently. "It's okay. You're home now. We'll fix this together." Once Amy had settled a bit, Lily sleeping soundly in a makeshift bed we'd cobbled together, she began to unravel the story we'd been missing. John and I sat across from her, our hearts heavy, bracing ourselves for what was to come. "Mom, Dad, I don't even know where to start. Everything's been a mess since the day I left with him," Amy began, her fingers twisting a loose thread on the blanket. "Just start from the beginning, sweetheart. We're here to listen," I urged gently, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Amy took a deep breath, her eyes fixed on the sleeping form of Lily. "It was all good at first, you know? Exciting even. But then, after we got married, things changed. He changed. The music gigs dried up, and he started drinking a lot." Her voice trailed off, a shiver running through her. John leaned forward, his face a mask of concern. "And then what, Amy?" She looked up, tears glistening in her eyes. "Then he started getting angry at everything, at me. It wasn't long before he started hitting me." Amy continued, her voice trembling. A sharp gasp escaped my lips, my hand flying to my mouth. John's jaw clenched, his hands forming fists on his knees. "That bastard," he muttered under his breath. Amy's words poured out like a floodgate opened. I thought I could handle it, that I could make it stop. But then I got pregnant with Lily, and everything got worse. He didn't work, just drank and yelled, and more. I was scared all the time. The room felt impossibly heavy, each word adding weight to our already burdened hearts. "Why didn't you come to us, Amy? Why didn't you tell us?" I asked, my voice a mix of pain and frustration. "I was ashamed, Mom, ashamed and scared. I thought I'd made my bed and had to lie in it. But when Lily was born, I realized I couldn't let her grow up in that. That's when I called you for the money. It was the only way I could think of to keep us afloat." John stood abruptly, pacing the room. "And his parents, what role did they play in all this?" he demanded. Amy's lips quivered as she spoke. "They were just as bad in their own way. His mom. She would make me do all the housework, watch every penny. If I did anything wrong, she'd take it out on me, on Lily. They all would." I reached across, taking her hand in mine. "You're safe now. Amy, you and Lily. We'll take care of you." Amy nodded, a frail smile on her lips. "I know, Mom. That's why I came here. I knew if anyone would help us, it would be you." John nodded, his face set in a grim line. "Tell us how you managed it, Amy. We need to know everything to protect you." She took a deep breath, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee mug. It wasn't easy. I had to wait for the right moment. His parents were out, and he was passed out drunk like usual. I grabbed Lily, some clothes, and whatever cash I could find. I didn't even have a car seat, just wrapped her in blankets and ran. I shuddered, imagining my daughter and granddaughter in such peril. "Oh, Amy, that's so dangerous. But you're here now, that's what matters." She continued, her eyes distant as she recounted the escape. "I hitched a ride to the nearest bus station. People must have seen the desperation in my eyes. No one asked too many questions. Each mile away from that house felt like a tiny victory. John's hand found mine under the table, a silent message of solidarity. And no one followed you? You were sure you weren't followed. Amy shook her head. I was careful, Dad. I know you taught me to be observant. I made sure we weren't followed. I just couldn't stay there a moment longer, not with Lily. I stood up, moving to the stove to busy myself with making more coffee, the actions mundane but necessary to keep the tremors at bay. You're brave. Amy, so brave. We'll make sure you never have to go back there. The day passed in a flurry of activity, securing the house and making appointments with lawyers and therapists. Anything and everything to ensure Amy and Lily's safety and well-being. John was on the phone most of the day, his voice a low rumble of barely contained fury and action. As night fell, Amy sat on the living room floor with Lily crawling around her, a scene so normal yet charged with the undercurrents of their recent ordeal. I can't thank you enough, both of you. I feel like I'm finally breathing again. Amy expressed her gratitude. John looked up from his paperwork, his gaze softening. You're our daughter, Amy. There's nothing we wouldn't do for you and Lily. I sat down beside her on the soft carpet. We meant it when we said forever, Amy. Forever means through the hard times, too. She leaned against me, her body weary, but her spirit flickering with the start of something new. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of healing. I know, Mom, I know. As we settled in for the night, the house felt different, as if the very walls were bracing to protect its inhabitants. Amy and Lily slept in the guest room, their breaths soft and even in the quiet. John and I lay in bed, our hands clasped between us, a silent vow to face whatever came next together. The escape to safety was just the beginning. But as I drifted off to sleep, I knew we were ready for it, ready to fight, to protect, and to heal. Our family, once broken, was mending one day, one moment at a time. With resolve hardening in our hearts, John and I drove to the address Amy had tearfully provided. The house loomed ahead, shabby and forlorn, a stark contrast to the warm, loving home we had left. John asked, his voice a low rumble of contained anger. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come. We walked up to the creaky door and knocked firmly. Shuffling feet approached from inside, and the door creaked open to reveal Amy's husband, a picture of neglect and disdain. We need to see Amy and the baby, John demanded, his gaze steely. The husband, with a dismissive snort, replied, They're sleeping. What do you want at this hour? The blatant lie made my blood boil. Sleeping? Don't play dumb. Amy's been with us since yesterday. She told us everything. I snapped, my voice sharp with fury. Behind him, his parents appeared, their expressions sour and defensive. What's all this about? Our daughter-in-law is fine, just sleeping off her tantrums, the mother sneered, a vile attempt at nonchalance. John stepped closer, his presence imposing. You think we're fools? Amy's safe from your abuse now. She's at our house, and she's told us everything. The trio exchanged nervous glances, the facade crumbling. You can't prove anything, the father blustered, trying to regain some ground. Without a word, John reached into his coat and flashed his police badge. The effect was immediate, their faces drained of color, their previous arrogance replaced by fear. We're just a family trying to get by, the mother whimpered, her bravado gone. John's voice was cold, the anger controlled but palpable. A family that preys on its weakest members? I don't think so. You'll be hearing from us and from the authorities. We turned and left them standing in their doorway, the reality of their situation sinking in. As we drove away, the weight of what we had started hung heavy in the air. Amy, holding Lily close, met us as we walked in, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and fear, searching ours for answers. They're scared now, Amy. Scared of the consequences. You and Lily are safe, John assured her, his hand resting on her shoulder. The night closed around us. As we settled in, I felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The first step had been taken, the demons confronted. Though the journey was far from over, we'd have faced it together, a united front against the past, and whatever the future might bring. Our family, once fractured, was finding its way back, one truth, one moment at a time. The morning after confronting Amy's in-laws, John and I sat at our kitchen table, a silent agreement between us. Today, we would ensure justice for Amy and Lily. John, with his years of experience on the force, made calls, his tone official and stern, setting the wheels of justice in motion. "Can you tell us everything again? The authorities will need your statement," John said, preparing a notepad, his expression serious but encouraging. Amy nodded, a determined glint in her eyes. "Yes, I'll tell them everything they need to know. What he did, what they all did." As she recounted her story, her voice trembled but never broke. She was a portrait of courage, a stark contrast to the frightened girl who had appeared on our doorstep. "When Lily was born, things got worse. I was isolated, controlled. I couldn't let her grow up in that," Amy explained, her hand squeezing mine. "You're doing the right thing, Amy. They won't hurt you or Lily ever again," I reassured her. Hours passed, filled with calls and visits from officers and lawyers. Each step was a move towards accountability and protection. Finally, with Amy's statement recorded and the legal process underway, we had a moment to breathe. "Mom, Dad, will they go to jail?" Amy asked, her eyes searching ours for assurance. John nodded, his voice firm. "They're facing charges of abuse and extortion. It's a strong case, especially with your testimony. They won't be free to hurt anyone else." The relief in Amy's eyes was palpable. She hugged Lily close, whispering words of love and safety to her daughter. As the day turned to evening, a sense of calm settled over the house. "I can't believe it's finally happening," Amy murmured, a small smile touching her lips. "It's only the beginning, sweetheart, but we'll be with you every step of the way," I reassured her, my heart swelling with pride for her bravery. John stood looking out the window into the growing darkness. "They'll learn that you don't mess with family, not without consequences." We sat in quiet solidarity, the trials of the past few days bonding us in ways we couldn't have imagined. The journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long time, there was a sense of hope, a light at the end of a long, dark tunnel. As night fell, and we prepared for bed, I checked on Amy and Lily sleeping peacefully in the guest room. The sight of them so serene was a balm to my weary soul. We'd faced the demons, and though the scars remained, we were healing, moving forward together. As the days turned into weeks, the dark cloud that had loomed over our family started to dissipate. Amy, now officially divorced and free from the man and the in-laws who had caused her so much pain, was finding her footing again. During breakfast one morning, as we all sat together, the atmosphere was lighter, almost buoyant. "You know, I've been thinking," I began, watching Lily attempt to spoon-feed herself. "How far we've come. It's like we've stepped into the light after such a long time in the dark." Amy, with a newfound strength in her eyes, smiled. "Yeah, Mom, it's like I'm finally waking up. The divorce, the trial, it's all behind me now. I can actually look forward to the days ahead." John, always the backbone of our family, nodded in agreement. "That's right. We're all moving forward now, stronger and wiser." Lily's giggles punctuated our conversation, a reminder of the innocence and joy that had returned to our home. As the day unfolded, Amy and I found ourselves in the garden, planting new flowers, a symbolic gesture of our new beginnings. "Mom, can you believe how much Lily's grown?" Amy remarked, her hands deep in the earth. "I can. She's going to be as strong and beautiful as her mother, and as resilient as her grandma, too," I replied, smiling. As evening approached, John joined us outside, wrapping an arm around my shoulder. "Look at our little family, Martha. This is what life's all about." I leaned into him, my heart full of gratitude. Yes, it is. A new beginning, a fresh start for all of us. Dinner was a lively affair, with Amy sharing her plans for the future, her voice tinged with excitement. "I'm thinking of going back to school, maybe even starting my own business. I want Lily to have a life filled with possibilities." John raised his glass, his eyes shining with pride. "To new beginnings, to family, and to justice. May we always find strength in each other. We toasted to our future, the sound of our glasses clinking a sweet symphony of hope and determination. As the night drew in, I tucked Lily into bed, watching as Amy sat beside her, a serene look on her face. I whispered a silent prayer of thanks as I turned off the light, grateful for the second chance we've been given. As I lay next to John, his presence a constant source of comfort, I knew that our journey hadn't been easy, but it had brought us here, to this moment of peace and togetherness. Are you kidding me? Pretending to be sick? Do you even know what I went through? It wasn't a ruse. I genuinely had a heat stroke. The reason my mother-in-law was so furious was that I couldn't attend my father-in-law's funeral. It's not like I didn't want to be there. From the morning, I felt unwell with symptoms of heat stroke and couldn't even stand up. I deeply regretted missing the funeral, but my mother-in-law didn't care. She berated me, saying, "Heat stroke. You could have come if you really pushed yourself." I was so weak, I couldn't even stand. I thought attending would be more of a hassle. After our argument, my mother-in-law forcefully pushed me, and oh no, it happened right at the top of the stairs. Losing my balance after the shove, I tumbled down the stairs. Suddenly, my mother-in-law shouted, "Watch out!" It took me a moment to realize, but I saw her beloved dog at the bottom of the stairs. Even if she warned me to avoid it, I had no choice but to collide with the dog. My name is Amy, and I'm turning 26 this year. I've been married to my husband Kevin for 2 years, who is 4 years older than me. We don't have kids yet, but we live happily together. "Did you go to my mom's again today?" Kevin asked. "Yeah, sorry. I have to do that every day. Ever since we got married, I started a part-time job at a local supermarket. But every day after work, I must visit my in-laws. My mother-in-law is a stay-at-home mom, but she never does any housework herself." "You're going to keep working after marrying Kevin?" she asked during our first visit for introductions. "Why not switch to part-time, then come to our house every day and help with the chores? Your domestic skills will improve, right? If you don't like it, then you shouldn't marry Kevin." I reluctantly agreed, wanting to marry Kevin despite the ridiculous condition. Since then, I've been going to my in-laws' house every weekday to do chores. I'm told not to come on weekends because my father-in-law is home. She probably doesn't want him to find out. I have to handle everything: laundry, cleaning, preparing dinner, and shopping. On Fridays, I also have to prepare meals for the weekend. "It must be tough for you every day," Kevin acknowledges. "You can take a break once in a while, you know." "Yeah, but I'm okay," I reply, and my husband, seeing how exhausted I look every day, tries to comfort me with kind words. If I didn't have to go, I wouldn't. Not only do I have to do chores at my in-laws' place, but I also have to handle our own home. I once begged my mother-in-law for a day off, but she coldly suggested, "Oh, really? Then we don't need you in this family anymore. Why don't you divorce Kevin and live a carefree life on your own?" I don't want to divorce. My parents were thrilled about our marriage, so it's been hard for me to tell Kevin that it's too much for me. How much longer will this continue? Physically and emotionally, I felt I was reaching my breaking point and had dark thoughts every day. But I never imagined things would escalate so much with my mother-in-law. One day, after finishing my part-time job, I went to my in-laws' house as usual. My mother-in-law had a grave expression on her face. "What's wrong?" I asked. "Oh, Amy, it's nothing," she replied. But her somber face and low voice betrayed her usual self. Despite her reluctance, I pressed her again. "You clearly look upset. What happened?" "Well," she began, "my husband has been diagnosed with colon cancer. They've given him only a short time to live. He's been urgently hospitalized, and he might not come back home." I hadn't seen my father-in-law recently, so I had no idea he was suffering from such a severe illness. Being told about the limited time he had left, I didn't know how to comfort my mother-in-law, and I felt helpless. "You don't have to be down too," I said softly. "Just go home for a day." "Do you not want me to do the chores?" I asked. "I just want to be alone today, so no need for chores," she replied. Respecting her wishes, I left their home that day. But thinking about it, it's quite heartbreaking. If my husband, Kevin, had such an illness, it wouldn't be someone else's business. My mother-in-law must have been devastated. I decided to give her some space, and I didn't go to their house the next day. However, the day after that, she called. "Hello, how are you? Why didn't you come yesterday? I thought since you were feeling down, that's no excuse. Come over now." She didn't have to get so angry. After she hung up abruptly, I headed to their house immediately. "You worthless daughter-in-law," she shouted as I entered. "The laundry is piled up, and I couldn't even eat dinner yesterday. Get to work, and while you're at it, take care of the dog." Entering their living room, I was met with a chaotic scene of clothes strewn everywhere. How could they make such a mess in just a day? In a way, that's quite a talent. "I'll get right on it," I said, starting by picking up the clothes scattered on the floor and beginning to do the laundry. And there was such a pile. While I was operating the washing machine, my mother-in-law called from the living room. "Why are you just standing there? Hurry up and clean." I know, I muttered, holding back from retorting. If I talked back, she might threaten divorce again. She instructed me to clean the room where her beloved dog stayed. Ah, what's that awful smell? That room didn't have air conditioning, and the poor dog living in such conditions was pitiable. Moreover, its waste was left untouched, creating a terrible stench. "You should take better care of the dog," I said quietly, knowing this was her way of getting back at me. "If you care about the dog, then why?" While listening to my mother-in-law, I was thinking internally. After that day, her mistreatment escalated. Taking advantage of my father-in-law's absence, she started summoning me not just on weekdays, but on weekends too, burdening me with all sorts of chores. Ultimately, I even ended up having to walk her dog. Living this way, I lost a significant amount of weight. I was sleep-deprived, waking up early, and looking after my own home became quite a challenge. Then, 6 months after my father-in-law's hospitalization, he passed away after his long battle. In the hospital room, my mother-in-law cried out, and I shed tears watching that scene. Though I hadn't seen him much recently, he'd always cared for me. It was heartbreaking that he was gone. I wanted to pay my respects and gratitude at the funeral. But the next day, I woke up feeling extremely ill. I wanted to bid him farewell with all my gratitude. However, when I woke up the next morning, I felt terribly ill. It was hard even to stand up. I had been making various preparations for my father-in-law's funeral, but symptoms similar to heat stroke began to manifest gradually. My hands and feet started cramping. "Hey, are you okay? You look pale." Kevin voiced his concern around noon. Apparently, my complexion was very off. "Yeah, I feel awful. My hands and feet are cramping. It might be heat stroke. Don't overdo it, okay?" "Yeah, I think I'll be okay if I just rest a bit." I reassured Kevin and decided to rest in a cooler room. However, even when it was time to head to the funeral, my condition didn't improve. "I'm sorry. I'm not feeling well. If I go like this, I might just be a bother." I expressed my regret to Kevin. "It's all right, Amy. Why don't you rest at home? I'll explain everything to everyone." "I'm so sorry I couldn't be there for your dad's last moments," Kevin comforted me. "Don't apologize. It's only natural to prioritize your own health. Make sure you get some good sleep, okay?" Reassured by my husband's kind words, I saw him off as he left for the funeral. Feeling relieved, I soon fell asleep. When I woke up and checked the clock, it was just past 5 o'clock a.m. the next morning. What? I slept that long? I was surprised at how long I'd been out. But thanks to that, I felt completely refreshed as I went about my usual routine, making breakfast and cleaning up. "Good morning. Did you sleep well?" my husband asked as he woke up. "Good morning. Thanks to you, I'm feeling great now." About yesterday, I explained everything to my husband. "I explained everything to Mom, but she's really upset you didn't attend the funeral," my husband said. "Figures. Guess I have to go and apologize," I sighed. I wasn't really looking forward to it, but I decided to head to my in-laws' house and apologized to my mother-in-law in person. "Hello. What are you doing here?" My mother-in-law greeted me coldly. "I'm sorry about yesterday. Just come in for now," I pleaded. Upon arriving at my in-laws, I apologized and was allowed inside. She glared at me with cold eyes, but she didn't say or do anything further and quickly retreated to her room upstairs. I need to apologize properly, I thought to myself. I followed her upstairs and tried to talk to her. "I'm really sorry about yesterday," I began. "What are you sorry for?" she snapped. "For not being able to attend the funeral," I replied softly. The moment I said that, my mother-in-law screamed at me, her face red with anger. "Are you kidding me? Faking sickness? Do you have any idea what I went through?" I wasn't faking it. I really had heat stroke. I truly didn't want to skip the funeral. I wanted to be there for my father-in-law's last moments. I explained, but of course she didn't know how I felt and continued to yell at me. "Heat stroke. You could have come if you really tried." My mother-in-law insisted, her anger unabated. It was so bad. I couldn't even stand, and I thought I'd just be in the way. "Stop it with the excuses. I don't want to hear it." After arguing with my mother-in-law, she pushed me hard. Oh no, the argument took place right at the top of the stairs. Losing my balance, I tumbled down the stairs. Suddenly, she shouted, "Watch out!" In a split second, I realized her beloved dog was at the bottom of the stairs. Even if she told me to watch out, there was nothing I could do. I ended up colliding with the dog. "What have you done?" Frantically, she rushed down the stairs, ignoring me. She was only concerned about her dog, so in her eyes, I'm less important than the dog. As I faded into unconsciousness, that thought lingered in my mind. When I woke up, I was in a hospital bed. The hospital. Why? I was disoriented, looking around in confusion. "Amy, you're awake." Thank God. My husband was beside the bed, relief evident on his face. "Why do you look so upset?" I fell from the stairs. Oh, I remember now. I recalled being pushed down the stairs by my mother-in-law. She told me you slipped and fell. I was so worried. "Slipped? Did she tell you that?" Kevin asked. "Yes. Why?" I replied. "She pushed me, and now she's lying about it. When I apologized for not attending your dad's funeral, she got heated and pushed me. I remember colliding with her dog after that." "What? You're kidding, right?" Kevin exclaimed. "I'm not kidding. When I apologized for not attending your dad's funeral, she got heated and pushed me. I remember colliding with her dog after that." I explained, but hearing the truth from me, Kevin buried his face in his hands. Well, it's no wonder. His own mother did something almost murderous. "Mom did that. I'm so sorry, Amy," Kevin said, then staggered out of my hospital room. Luckily, I only suffered bruises and was discharged the next day. There's still a bit of pain, but it shouldn't interfere with daily life. As I entered the house, I could hear Kevin arguing with his mother from the living room. "What have you done?" "I've told you. I didn't do anything," Kevin shouted. "What's all the fuss about?" I asked, opening the door to the living room where they were arguing. "I got home and was confronting Mom about what you told me yesterday, but she insists it didn't happen." "I didn't do anything, right?" Kevin questioned. The nerve of her to play innocent in front of me. I can't believe her. "More importantly, because of you falling down the stairs, my dear dog got hurt." "Aren't you going to apologize for that?" My mother-in-law retorted. "That dog? Glad it was only injured, but is she serious? She's the one who should be apologizing," I thought, my anger towards her starting to bubble up. "If you don't say anything, how will we know? Can't you apologize? If you can't, maybe you shouldn't be with Kevin. Should I help you guys divorce? That's enough. I've had it." Having reached my limit, I decided to vent all the frustration. I've been holding back on her. If you want a divorce, go right ahead. But aren't you the one who needs to apologize? "Sure, I'm sorry for injuring your dog, but this was all because of you. If you hadn't pushed me, none of this would have happened." "What? Do you have any proof that I pushed you?" My mother-in-law retorted. "If that's how you want to play it, That's fine. Maybe I should have the police investigate this as assault. If she thinks I'm just going to let this slide, she's mistaken, I challenged. But the moment I mentioned the police, her face turned pale. The police? You're exaggerating. I lost consciousness because of what you did. It was fortunate that I only got bruises, but what if it had been worse? What if I had died? You'd be arrested for murder, wouldn't you? I pressed on. So, what will you do? Apologize? I asked. She looked like she was about to cry, but instead of apologizing, she just stood there silently. Losing his patience, Kevin started yelling at her. What's it going to be, huh? Say something. Weren't you the one who said silence won't solve anything? I interjected. I'm sorry. I promise I won't do anything like this ever again. Please forgive me, she finally apologized, but it took her son yelling at her to make her do so. She clearly didn't take me seriously. Even though she apologized, deep down, I felt resentment. Well, all right. I'll let it slide just this once. I conceded, but she thought I'd forgive everything she's done. Boy, was she wrong. I confronted my mother-in-law and said, as for this incident, sure, but I'm not going to let go of everything else. Every single day, you took advantage of me. Cleaning, laundry, cooking, shopping. You dumped everything on me. Every time I tried to refuse, you threatened me with divorce. I'm fed up. I never want to see your face again. Just get out of here. I'm so sorry. My mother-in-law's voice wavered, and she slumped to the ground. It seemed her knees had given out, unable to get up. Don't you dare dump your chores on me again, and if you try anything like this, I won't hesitate to call the police. Got it? Now get out of this house, I demanded. Yes, I'm sorry. She apologized once more, and in sheer fear, my mother-in-law crawled out of the living room and left my house. That felt good, Amy? When you get mad, you're kind of scary, Kevin remarked. Well, maybe if you take me lightly, you'll end up like your mother. I'd never underestimate you. I'll take it to heart, I replied. After my mother-in-law left, Kevin and I had that conversation. In the past, I was constantly threatened with divorce by her, never really able to speak my mind. This incident allowed me to finally give her a piece of it, a silver lining in an unfortunate situation. Thinking about it, no one can force someone to divorce. Back then, I felt cornered, unable to think clearly. At least now, I don't have to visit and take care of her anymore. She's going to have to step up and do her chores. A week later, I was back to my peaceful routine. The bruises from the fall had healed, and I felt no pain. What made me happiest was not having to go to that stressful house every day. After finishing my part-time job, I returned home to relax and do housework. The simple joys in life felt so rewarding. I'm home, Kevin announced as he returned from work, though he was later than usual. Welcome back. You're late today. Did you have overtime? I asked. No, I went to check on my mother, right? I might have cut ties with her, but she's still Kevin's only remaining family, I thought. Oh, I see. How's she doing? Is she okay? I inquired. But as I asked, Kevin's face darkened. I thought, could she be sick? If so, I genuinely feel sorry for Kevin, losing both parents to severe illness one after the other, I pondered. She's not doing any housework. The house is filled with trash, clothes scattered everywhere, and she hasn't been taking care of the dog either. It stinks so bad, really. She probably forgot how to do housework since she always relied on me. But when I yelled at her, saying if she can't clean, I'll put her in a care facility, she quickly started cleaning. It's just unbelievable, Kevin revealed. After being disappointed by her son and abandoned by her daughter-in-law, she's reaping what she sowed. 6 months later, Kevin occasionally visits her, but she's still as lazy as ever. But I've got my own life now. I have decided to live happily with Kevin and our unborn child, without any interference, I concluded. In the midst of a charming town nestled among rolling hills and meandering streams, my childhood unfolded in a world far removed from the glitz and glamour of city life. Our small weathered house, with creaking wooden floors and windows framing views of sprawling fields, constituted a universe of its own. Amidst the simplicity and warmth of family love, my story began. Though my parents were not fluent, they were rich in kindness and wisdom. My father, a local carpenter with hands weathered by years of labor, possessed a gentle touch that went beyond crafting furniture, instilling in me the values of hard work and humility. My mother, a school teacher, filled our home with books and stories that sparked my imagination and nurtured my dreams. Life in our small town was unhurried and unpretentious. Neighbors greeted each other with familiarity, and community events were the highlights of our social calendar. I cherished this life, finding joy in small pleasures like the fresh scent of earth after rain, the rustling of leaves underfoot, and the chorus of birds at dawn. It was at the local library where I first encountered Mark. Unlike anyone I had known, he was a visitor from the city with an air of sophistication yet an unassuming nature. Despite his family's wealth and influence, Mark's easy smile and genuine interest in my mundane tales made him a refreshing anomaly in that world. Our initial conversations were tentative, like two worlds cautiously orbiting each other. Mark spoke of city life, the fast pace, endless opportunities, and dazzling lights. In return, I shared stories of my town, the annual harvest festival, serene walks by the stream, and the close-knit community. In those early days, we often met at the old park bench by the lake, our conversations stretching for hours. The lake, with its placid waters reflecting the changing hues of the sky, bore witness to our growing connection, an invisible thread weaving our disparate worlds into one. One evening, Mark said to me, his voice tinged with a vulnerability I had not seen before, "Anna, I have always been surrounded by people who care more about wealth and status, but with you, I found a serenity that I didn't know existed. You show me a different way of life, one that's genuine and full of warmth." His words stirred something deep within me. Mark, where we come from doesn't define us. It's who we are when we're together that matters. You've brought a new perspective into my life, opening my eyes to dreams I never dared to have. As our relationship deepened, Mark confided in me about his family, particularly his mother, a woman of elegance with stringent expectations. He spoke of her with respect, yet there was an underlying concern in his words. "She has her own ideas about who I should be with. I'm just worried about how she'll react to, well, to us." I reached out, taking his hand in mine, feeling the slight tremor. "We'll face that together," I assured him. Love isn't about backgrounds or expectations. It's about two people who choose each other against all odds. The day Mark proposed was as unassuming as our love. No grand gestures, just a heartfelt promise of a life together. As I looked into his eyes brimming with hope and love, I knew this was just the beginning. The evening I was set to meet Mark's family, my nerves were on edge. The grandeur of their mansion loomed large, a stark reminder of the different worlds Mark and I came from. Mark held my hand, giving me a reassuring look. "Just be yourself. Anna, that's all you need to be." I smiled weakly, trying to quell the rising anxiety. "I just hope your mom doesn't think I'm out of place." Mark sighed, a hint of concern in his eyes. "Mom can be a bit much. Just remember, I'm here with you." As we entered the opulent dining room, Mark's mother, Moran, a statuesque woman with an air of austerity, greeted us. Her eyes quickly took me in, a flicker of disapproval passing over her face. "So this is the young lady who's captured my son's heart. Interesting choice, Mark." Dinner was an elaborate affair, the table set with dishes I couldn't even name. Mark's mother, ever the gracious host, offered me a plate with a sly smile. "I suppose these dishes might be a bit too sophisticated for your taste, Anna. We can get something simpler if you prefer." I felt a flush of embarrassment, but managed a polite decline. "No, thank you. I'm always eager to try new things." As the evening progressed, her comments grew more pointed. She eyed my dress, a simple but neat outfit I had thought was appropriate. "Is that what passes for evening wear in your town? It must be challenging to find good clothes on a modest budget." Mark jumped in, trying to steer the conversation elsewhere, but his mother was unrelenting. "Tell me, Anna, what do your parents do?" It's always fascinating to learn about different walks of life. I answered, feeling the weight of her judgment. "My father is a carpenter, and my mother is a school teacher." "Oh, how quaint," she replied, her voice dripping with condescendence. "Hardworking people, I'm sure, but I suppose they couldn't offer you much in the way of financial head start." The meal continued with her taking jabs at my small town upbringing, my parents' humble occupations, and even my salary, which she had somehow learned about. Each comment was veiled in politeness, but sharp enough to cut. Mark was visibly uncomfortable, his attempts at defending me only seeming to amuse her more. As we left, Mark's father, Daniel, pulled me aside, offering a kind smile. "Anna, you handled yourself well. Don't let her get to you. She'll come around." In the car, Mark apologized profusely. "I'm so sorry, Anna. I didn't think she'd be this harsh." I sighed, a mix of hurt and determination in my voice. "It's okay, Mark. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I love you, and that's what matters." That night, as I lay in bed, the sting of his mother's words lingered. Beneath the hurt, a resolve was building. This was more than just about fitting in. It was a test of our love and my strength, and I was ready to face it. As the wedding day approached, the air buzzed with excitement, but unfortunately carried a growing tension. Marin, who had taken it upon herself to oversee the preparations, seemed to derive a peculiar pleasure from belittling my ideas and choices at every turn. One afternoon, while discussing the wedding plans with Mark and his mother, the topic of the wedding dress surfaced. I had chosen a simple yet elegant gown that I believed reflected my personality. Mark's mother, however, had different ideas. "That dress, Anna, it's so plain. Don't you want to make a statement on your big day? After all, you're marrying into the family," she remarked, her voice laced with a patronizing tone. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, giving me a supportive look. "Mom, Anna looks beautiful in that dress. It's her choice, and it's perfect." His mother, however, remained relentless. "Oh, Mark, let's be realistic. This is a high-profile event, and people expect a certain standard. Anna, dear, you should consider something more fitting of our family status." I tried to keep my voice steady, though her words stung. "I appreciate your concern, but I really love my dress. It's special to me." Her response was a dismissive wave. "Well, it's your day, I suppose. But remember, it's not just about you. It's about how you represent us too." As the days passed, her comments became more frequent and cutting. Maureen criticized everything from flower arrangements to menu choices and even the invitations. Each remark subtly dug at my background and my perceived inability to meet her lofty standards. Mark and I had numerous conversations about this, often late into the night. "I can't believe she's being so difficult," Mark would express, frustration evident in his voice. "I wish she could just see how amazing you are, how you make me happy." I would lie there, feeling his arms around me, a mix of love and sorrow in my heart. I knew marrying into his family wouldn't be easy, but I didn't expect it to be this challenging. The wedding day dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the turmoil churning within me. My parents and I had worked hard to make everything perfect, despite the constant criticisms from Moran. As I dressed in my simple but elegant gown, I hoped the day would pass without incident. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love and heartfelt vows. Mark's eyes shone with affection and promise as we said our I do. However, looming over the joyous occasion was the apprehension of the reception to follow, particularly the speeches. As expected, Maren took the microphone, her presence commanding the room's attention. The air was thick with expectation as she began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen," she started, her voice loud and clear. "Today we have gathered to witness the union of my son Mark with Anna, let's say, a person from a different circle." Whispers spread through the guests, and I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. She continued, her words sharp and unyielding. "While some may commend Mark for his charitable heart in lifting a beggar from the streets, we must be cautious. It's essential to keep our family's reputation and standards high, not let them be diluted by those who are clearly freeloaders seeking to elevate their status by clinging to a family of higher standing. The room fell into a stunned silence. My parents looked at me, their faces a mix of shock and hurt. Mark's face was a mask of disbelief and anger. The guests, a mix of our friends and Mark's high society acquaintances, looked on uncomfortably, unsure of how to react. My heart sank, and a profound shame washed over me. Her words, so cruel in public, were more than just insults. They were a deliberate attempt to shame and belittle me in front of everyone we cared about. As she concluded her speech with a forced toast to our future, the applause was hesitant and muted. The room was enveloped in an awkward silence, the joy of the occasion marred by her venomous words. Mark stood up, his voice trembling slightly. "I'm sorry, Anna. This isn't what I wanted." His eyes were apologetic, filled with a mix of love and sorrow. I looked around at the shocked faces of our guests, feeling incredibly humiliated. The weight of her words hung heavily in the air, casting a shadow over what was supposed to be the happiest day of our lives. The atmosphere at the reception remained tense following the disparaging speech by Mark's mother. When his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, a figure of respect and authority in the family, requested the microphone, her poised demeanor and serious expression immediately drew the attention of all the guests. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and firm. "I have something important to say. Anna, you have faced unwarranted criticism today. Criticism that no one deserves, especially not on their wedding day." I looked up in surprise, and Mark beside me appeared equally astonished. Mrs. Eleanor then turned towards Moran. "It seems we have forgotten our own past and where we come from. Let me remind everyone here, especially you, that before you were the lady of this house, you were a maid working under this very roof. It was here that you met your husband." A hush fell over the room. Mark's mother's face turned a shade paler, her eyes widening in shock and embarrassment. Mrs. Eleanor continued, her tone unyielding. "So, for a former maid to stand here and scorn someone for their humble beginnings and modest means is not only ironic, but deeply hypocritical." I could hardly believe what I was hearing. The room was engulfed in stunned silence, every guest hanging on to Mrs. Eleanor's every word. You, who rose from poverty, should be the last person to judge or belittle another based on their background. We should be proud of Anna's integrity and strength, not deride her for it. The guests shifted uncomfortably, and whispers began to circulate. Marin sat motionless, the impact of Mrs. Eleanor's words evident on her face. In this family, we value character over wealth, kindness over status. Anna exemplifies these values, and I am proud to welcome her into our family, Mrs. Eleanor concluded, her gaze softening as she looked at me. The room erupted into applause, a stark contrast to the earlier muted response. Marin sat there, completely humbled, her earlier arrogance replaced by a visible sense of shame. To be honest, I didn't feel sorry for her. Mark whispered to me, "I never expected Grandma to stand up for us like this." I squeezed his hand, feeling a mix of relief and gratitude. She's amazing. The rest of the evening felt lighter, the air cleared by Mrs. Eleanor's candid defense. Guests approached with warm congratulations and sincere smiles. I felt that they were all on my side. It felt damn good. As we left the reception hand in hand, I felt a renewed sense of confidence and belonging. Mrs. Eleanor's words had shifted the dynamics, breaking the insidious plan of a cruel and not the smartest woman. The days after the wedding were heavy with unspoken tension that hung over Mark's family like a dense fog. It all came to a head during a family meeting at Mrs. Eleanor's house, where the air was thick with expectation and apprehension. As we gathered in the grand living room, Mrs. Eleanor began without preamble, her voice firm and unwavering. "What happened at the wedding cannot be overlooked. The way you spoke to Anna, it was disgraceful." She addressed Moran directly, her eyes sharp. Mark's mother, usually so composed, looked smaller somehow. Her usual confidence diminished. "Eleanor, I've already apologized to Anna, she said, her voice tinged with a hint of defiance. It's not just about an apology, Mrs. Eleanor retorted. Your actions reflect on this entire family. You've become accustomed to a lifestyle funded by the family's money without appreciating its value. Mark's father nodded in agreement, his expression serious. My mother is right. You've lost sight of what's important. Mrs. Eleanor then laid out her decision, each word deliberate and clear. I decided to cut off the financial support you've been receiving. It's time you start contributing to this family instead of just taking. You'll need to find a job and learn to live within your means. The shock on Moran's face was evident. She turned to her husband, seeking support. You can't agree with this. She can't just cut me off like this. But Daniel surprised her. I stand with my mother on this. You've gone too far this time. It's for your own good. Moran's eyes filled with anger and disbelief, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her new reality. Mark, who had been silent, spoke up, his voice steady. Mom, Grandma's decision is harsh, but it's fair. You need to understand the impact of your words and actions. I sat there, watching the scene unfold, feeling a mix of sympathy and relief. Mark squeezed my hand under the table, a silent show of support. The meeting ended with Mark's mother in a state of shock, the reality of her situation slowly sinking in. She was obviously used to living at the expense of her family, and all thoughts of work caused her a migraine. I could barely contain a chuckle. As we left, Mark leaned in close. I never thought I'd see the day when Mom would be at a loss for words, but maybe this is what she needs to change. I nodded, feeling a cautious hope for the future. Perhaps this will be a new beginning for her, for all of us. The family reckoning had been tough but necessary. It was a pivotal moment that promised to reshape the dynamics within Mark's family, hopefully for the better. The honeymoon was a welcome escape for Mark and me. As we walked along the sandy beaches, the soothing sound of the waves provided a much-needed respite from the recent family turmoil. One evening, as we watched the sunset, Mark wrapped his arm around me. I'm sorry our wedding turned into such a drama, Anna. I wish things had been different. I leaned into him, feeling the warmth of his embrace. It's okay, Mark. It wasn't your fault. What matters is we're together now, away from all that stress. Mark sighed, looking out over the ocean. Yeah, but when we go back, we'll have to face the reality of my mom's situation. It's going to be tough for her. I nodded, understanding his concern. Maybe this will be a chance for her to grow, to see things from a different perspective. We spend our days exploring and our nights talking about our future. The challenges we have faced seem to strengthen our bond, reaffirming our love to each other. On our last night, as we packed our bags, Mark looked thoughtful. You know, Anna, everything that happened made me realize how important you are to me. I can't imagine going through life with anyone else. I smiled, touched by his words. I feel the same, Mark. We've been through a lot, but it's only made our relationship stronger. We can handle whatever comes our way as long as we're together. As we headed back home, I felt a sense of peace. The honeymoon had not only been a break from the chaos, but a time for us to solidify our bond, to prepare ourselves for the new chapter in our lives. We were returning to a changed reality, but we were doing it together, stronger and more united than ever. The future was uncertain, but I was ready to face it with Mark by my side. Coming back from our honeymoon, Mark and I were unsure of what awaited us at his family home. The car ride was quiet, both of us lost in our thoughts about the new family dynamics. As we arrived, the first thing we noticed was the absence of Mark's mother. Inside, we were greeted by his grandmother, Mrs. Eleanor, who wore a knowing smile. Welcome back, you two. I suppose you're wondering about the changes here, she said, her tone light but with an undercurrent of seriousness. Yes, where's Mom? Mark asked, looking around. Mrs. Eleanor took a deep breath, her smile still in place. Well, after you left, Marin caused quite a scene, demanded that I restore her financial support. When I refused, she decided to leave. She's now living in a small apartment, and from what I hear, is looking for a job. Mark and I exchanged glances, the news sinking in. It was a drastic change from the luxurious life she was used to. And there's more, Mrs. Eleanor continued, leaning in as if to share a secret. Your father is considering a divorce. He's had enough of her antics. Seems like she finally pushed him too far. Mark's expression was one of shock mixed with a hint of relief. I can't believe it. I mean, I knew things would change, but this is more than I expected. I reached out, touching his arm. It's a lot to take in, but maybe this is for the best. A chance for everyone to start fresh on a more honest footing. Dinner that night was an oddly serene affair. The absence of Mark's mother was felt, but not in the way we had anticipated. The conversation was more open, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like there was a real sense of family. As we drove home later that evening, Mark was pensive. I always hoped for a change, but I didn't expect it to happen like this. It's going to be a big adjustment for Mom. I nodded. It's a tough situation, but maybe it's a necessary step for her to grow. And for your dad, too, to find some peace. The ride home was reflective, both of us contemplating the new reality we were returning to. The family we left before the honeymoon was not the same one we were coming back to. It was a sobering thought, but in many ways, a hopeful one. Change, though painful at times, was often the path to something better, and we were ready to face it together. I am Clara, a 32-year-old woman who once believed in fairy tale endings. 3 years ago, my life took an unexpected turn when I crossed paths with Mark, the man who would eventually become my husband. This is our story. A journey marked by love, trust, and eventual betrayal, all against the backdrop of what seemed to be a perfect marriage. It was just an ordinary Tuesday morning when fate led me to the corner cafe, engrossed in a John Grisham novel. Lost in the world of legal thrillers, I was interrupted by Mark's presence. He exuded confidence yet possessed a warmth in his smile that beckoned me in. Hey, is that Grisham's latest? He asked, nodding towards my book. His friendly voice, tinged with genuine curiosity, sparked a pleasantly surprising conversation. We delved into discussions about our favorite authors, and our conversation flowed effortlessly. In the weeks that followed, Mark and I grew closer. Shared interests in music, particularly old jazz, and a mutual love for exploring hidden bookstores solidified our bond. Mark was charming, respectful, and attentive, making each encounter feel like catching up with an old friend rather than meeting a stranger. As our connection deepened, Mark confessed his feelings one evening along the river, his words carrying a genuine warmth. Clara, I've never felt this way before. I think I'm falling for you, he admitted under the dim streetlights. A rush of warmth enveloped me as I confessed my reciprocated feelings. Our relationship flourished, and 6 months later, during a cozy dinner at my apartment, Mark proposed. The moment was simple yet profoundly sincere, and my unequivocal yes expressed my belief in our future together. However, the joy of our engagement was soon met with apprehension when it was time to meet Mark's parents. Linda, his mother, exuded sternness with piercing eyes that seemed judgmental. His father, though more amiable, carried an undeniable seriousness, especially regarding the institution of marriage. During a formal dinner at their house, Mark's father brought up the subject of a prenuptial agreement, catching me off guard. Understanding the necessity due to past experiences with a cheating ex-boyfriend, I agreed, but with a condition. I proposed a $100,000 penalty for infidelity, a term Mark respected. Our wedding was a beautiful affair filled with laughter, dancing, and promises of forever. The first year of our marriage felt like living in a dream, traveling to romantic destinations, enjoying quiet evenings at home, and supporting each other's dreams. Mark wasn't merely my husband. He was my confidant and best friend. Following the whirlwind of our wedding, we seamlessly settled into married life, surprising even me with the ease of our transition. Our first year was a bubble of happiness, untouched by the outside world. Our honeymoon in Paris felt like a dream, strolling along the Seine, lost in the enchanting city of love. One evening, as we watched the Eiffel Tower illuminate, I asked Mark, "Can you believe we're here?" Pulling me close, he responded, "With you, I can believe anything." This is just the start for us, Clara. Days filled with laughter, romantic dinners, and promises of a future together created memories that made our bond feel unbreakable. Back home, our days settled into a comfortable routine. Mark kissed me goodbye every morning, and I eagerly awaited his return with dinner. Our conversations spanned everything and nothing, stretching late into the night. One evening, as we cleaned up after dinner, Mark expressed his unexpected happiness, remarking, "I never thought I'd be this happy doing mundane stuff like washing dishes." I playfully splashed water at him, and he laughed, catching it in his hands, saying, "It's all about good company. Marrying you was the best decision of my life." Despite our happiness, external pressures began mounting, particularly regarding the expectation of starting a family. Linda, Mark's mother, would drop not-so-subtle hints at family gatherings, pressing us about when we'd share good news. Attempting to deflect with humor, I replied, "You'll be the first to know when there's news." However, her persistence increased over time, straining me. Mark noticed my discomfort and reassured me, saying, "Don't let my mom get to you. We'll start a family when we're ready, not a minute sooner." Our first year of marriage remained magical, marked by a quiet anniversary celebration at home, where Mark surprised me with a necklace I had admired months earlier. "Happy anniversary, Clara. Here's to many more years of happiness," he said, his eyes shining with love. That night, as we cuddled on the couch, I felt incredibly lucky to have a loving husband, a cozy home, and a seemingly bright future. As our second year of marriage unfolded, the mounting pressure from Mark's family, especially his mother Linda, started taking a toll. It wasn't solely about starting a family anymore. Linda's criticisms permeated every aspect of our lives. Every visit from her became a nightmarish experience for me. One afternoon, as I set the table for lunch, Linda walked into the kitchen and surveyed the spread with a disapproving frown. "Is this what you're serving? A bit simple, don't you think?" Her tone dripped with disdain, and I clenched my jaw, attempting to maintain composure. "I thought we'd enjoy something light today," I replied, but she just sniffed, muttering under her breath about proper meals and good housekeeping. Linda's critical comments extended beyond my cooking. She found fault in everything, from the house decor to how I spent my free time. One evening, while Mark and I were relaxing in the living room, Linda offered her unsolicited opinion. "You know, Clara, if Mark gave me the money he spends on you, I could hire a proper cleaner and a cook." Mark looked uncomfortable but remained silent, which felt like a betrayal. Despite my seething frustration, I managed to respond, "Well, Linda, I'm doing my best here." The most hurtful part was when Mark's attitude began to change, echoing his mother's criticisms in a more subtle manner. After one of Linda's visits, he casually mentioned, "Mom might have a point about the house. Maybe we should consider getting some help." I felt a pang of hurt and frustration, asking, "So you think I can't handle it either?" He backpedaled, but the damage was done. The constant criticisms and Mark's growing detachment strained our marriage. Arguments over trivial matters became frequent, and our once easy conversations turned into tense exchanges. After a particularly heated argument, I found myself wondering aloud, what happened to us, Mark? We used to be on the same team. Mark ran a hand through his hair, looking frustrated. "I don't know, Clara. Everything just feels so complicated now." That night, I went to bed feeling lonely and misunderstood. Linda's insidious comments had invaded not only my home but also my marriage. I began to question if the love Mark and I shared was strong enough to withstand this constant barrage of negativity. As the third year of our marriage unfolded, a sense of unease settled in my heart. The once bright flame of our love seemed to flicker under the shadow of doubt and mistrust. It all began with a series of phone calls, a name recurring on Mark's phone, Jake. I couldn't ignore how Mark's demeanor changed whenever that name flashed on the screen. One evening, as we watched TV, Mark's phone rang again, displaying Jake's name. Mark quickly silenced it, throwing a nervous glance my way. "Who's Jake?" I asked, attempting to sound casual, but my heart pounded. "Just a new guy at work, no one important," Mark replied, but his voice betrayed a rehearsed nonchalance. Mark's behavior shifted. He started coming home late with flimsy and inconsistent excuses. His wardrobe transformed from casual to sharply tailored suits, and suspicions grew. Working late again. I questioned one night, noticing his dressed-up appearance. "Yeah, big project," he said, avoiding eye contact. "Don't wait up." Frustration boiled over, and one day, as Mark was about to leave for another late night at work, I confronted him. "This isn't like you, Mark. What's really going on?" My voice trembled with a mixture of anger and fear. Mark sighed, guilt and annoyance in his expression. "I told you, it's just work. Why can't you trust me?" I shot back, my eyes stinging with tears. Mark left without responding, leaving me feeling more alone than ever. That night, lying in our empty bed, I made a decision. I couldn't live in this limbo of doubt and suspicion. I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. The next morning, I called a private detective. It felt like a betrayal, but the constant worry and uncertainty were eating me alive. I needed answers, and I was determined to get them, no matter what they revealed about the man I thought I knew. The days after contacting the private detective were a haze of anxiety and anticipation. I felt like I was walking on a tightrope, trying to maintain a semblance of normalcy while my world quietly crumbled. Then the call came, shattering my last hope. "Mrs. Johnson, we have conclusive evidence. I'm afraid your suspicions were correct." The detective's voice was solemn, heavy with the weight of the news. He explained that Mark had been having an affair. The mysterious Jake was, in fact, a woman. My heart sank as he detailed their meetings, providing timestamps and photos. It was irrefutable. I sat there, thumb in hand, feeling a mix of devastation and vindication. My worst fears weren't just fears anymore. Despite the cold, hard facts of Mark's infidelity, I decided to bide my time and gather more evidence before confronting him. One evening, as I passed by his home office, I overheard a conversation that sent shivers down my spine. Mark was discussing our impending separation with his mother, Linda. "Mom, I'm planning to end it with Clara after your birthday." Mark's voice was devoid of any affection he once had for me. Linda, in her callous manner, responded, "Oh, that's wise, dear. Make sure she gets me a nice 65th birthday present before you drop the bomb." My nausea intensified. Not only was my husband unfaithful, but he and his mother were conspiring against me, planning to use me for one last expensive gift before discarding me. Fueled by anger and resolve, I decided to play along, pretending nothing was wrong while secretly gathering more evidence of Mark's infidelity. The detective provided me with photos, videos, and even audio recordings. Each night, lying next to the man who had betrayed me, a plan began to form in my mind. I would wait until after Linda's birthday, giving them the illusion of victory. When they least expected it, I would reveal everything and turn the tables. As Linda's 65th birthday approached, I put on a mask of ignorance, acting as though everything was normal. Inside, I was a cauldron of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a fierce determination to see my plan through. A few days before the birthday, Linda casually mentioned her upcoming celebration during a family dinner, anticipating a grand gift. "So, Clara, I'm expecting a grand 65th birthday. You must have planned something special for me," she said with a sly smile. Keeping my emotions in check, I replied with faint enthusiasm, "Of course, Linda. I've arranged a dinner at the city's most luxurious restaurant. It'll be a night to remember." Her eyes lit up with glee, unaware of the trap I was setting. "How wonderful! I can't wait. Just a small family gathering, right?" she inquired. "Yes, very intimate and exclusive. Just for close family," I confirmed, my words laced with hidden irony. Later that night, Mark approached me with a hint of suspicion in his voice. "That's quite a generous plan for Mom's birthday. Are you sure about this?" I looked at him, maintaining my composure, and replied, "Absolutely. It's a significant birthday, and I want to do something special for her. Mark seemed appeased, unaware of the storm brewing beneath the surface. But I could tell he was puzzled by my willingness to indulge his mother. As the day of the dinner drew near, I took care of the final arrangements, confirming the booking in Linda's name, rechecking the guest list, and ensuring everything was set for the grand evening. I played the dutiful wife and daughter-in-law, but beneath the facade, I was ready to expose the betrayal and deceit that had been festering in our marriage. The night before the dinner, lying in bed, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. I was hours away from turning the tables on Mark and Linda. They thought they were using me for one last benefit before discarding me. Little did they know I was the one controlling the game now. The evening of Linda's 65th birthday unfolded in a luxurious restaurant, every detail meticulously planned to reflect the grandeur of the occasion. As Linda reveled in the opulence, I played the part of the gracious daughter-in-law, masking my inner turmoil with a practiced smile. As the dinner drew to a close, the waiter presented the bill. $4,500. I reached for my card with a steady hand, my heart pounding in my chest. After swiping the card, I glanced around the table, seeing Linda's satisfied smirk and Mark's uneasy expression. "Thank you for such a wonderful evening, Clara. This is truly generous," Linda said, her voice dripping with insincerity. It was then that Mark leaned in, his voice laced with mockery. "By the way, Clara, I want a divorce." The words hit me like a physical blow, but I refused to let them see my pain. Seizing the moment, Linda chimed in sharply. "Well, then I guess you should leave. This is a family gathering after all." Without a word, I stood up and left the restaurant. With my dignity intact, despite the turmoil inside, I walked away. Pulling out my phone, I swiftly canceled the payment and blocked the shared account, ensuring Mark couldn't cover the cost either. Back at home, I packed my belongings quickly, the finality of my actions setting in. I was leaving this chapter of my life behind, stepping into an uncertain but hopeful future. Soon, my phone erupted with calls. I answered, and Linda's voice, shrill with rage and panic, filled my ears. The payment didn't go through. The restaurant staff called the police. "What have you done?" Her words were a cacophony of anger and disbelief, but I remained silent, letting her tirade wash over me. This was their doing, their betrayal and manipulation coming back to haunt them. After hanging up, I looked around the empty house, a place once filled with dreams and love, now just a hollow shell. I took a deep breath, stepped out the door, and didn't look back. Their calls continued, desperate pleas for help that I no longer felt obliged to answer. I had made my move, exposed their deceit, and now it was time for me to rebuild away from the lies and the pain that had defined my life for far too long. After leaving my marital home, I spent a restless night at a friend's place, my mind racing with what needed to be done next. The morning sun brought with it a sense of clarity and determination. It was time for the final confrontation. I arrived at the house to find Mark and Linda waiting, their faces a mix of anger and confusion. Clutching the divorce papers and the evidence of Mark's infidelity, I steeled myself for the battle ahead. Linda was the first to break the silence, her voice dripping with scorn. "So you've come crawling back after embarrassing us like that?" I met her gaze unflinching. "I'm not here to crawl. I'm here for a divorce." Mark, who announced our divorce a day ago, suddenly tried to win everything back. "Clara, can't we talk about this? It was a mistake, I cut him off, holding up the evidence. "Save it, Mark. Your mistake was ongoing and well documented." Linda scoffed, trying to regain control. "You think you can just walk away and leave us with nothing. You're nothing without us." I laid the divorce papers on the table. "Actually, it's you who will be leaving me with something. According to our prenup, Mark owes me $100,000 for his infidelity." Mark's face went pale, and Linda's eyes widened in shock as they scrambled to respond. I felt the weight lifting off my shoulders. This was it, the end of the lies, the deceit, and the pain. "You can try to fight this, but the evidence is clear. I suggest you pay up and move on," I said, my voice steady. Mark looked defeated, and Linda was speechless, her usual bravado gone. With no further words, I turned and walked out of the house, the door closing behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. The calls and pleas that followed fell on deaf ears. I had closed that chapter of my life for good. In the end, they paid. Mark had to borrow from his parents, but I didn't care where the money came from. It was a small compensation for the betrayal, but more importantly, it was closure. As I sat in the lawyer's office, signing the last of the papers, I felt a sense of peace. The journey had been painful, full of betrayal and heartache, but I had come out stronger, more resilient. I walked out into the sunlight, a free woman, ready to start anew. The future was uncertain, but it was mine to shape. After all the darkness, I finally felt like I was stepping into the light. I received a call at work informing me of my husband's accident that left him paralyzed for life. Reluctantly, I rushed to the hospital, where my mother-in-law greeted me with words that demanded my lifelong commitment to care for him. Thankfully, his condition wasn't life-threatening. Sighing deeply, I faced my mother-in-law, who presumed it was only natural for me, his wife, to take on the responsibility. Firmly, I refused, stating that I had nothing to do with him anymore. It was his fault. Despite my rejection, she insisted I stay by his side, calling me heartless and a demon. Feeling the futility of arguing, I attempted to leave the treatment room, but she grabbed my arm tightly, tearfully asking if I planned to abandon her son. My resolve remained unchanged, and I shook her off, leaving the hospital. At home, I immediately started packing, determined to move on and create a happy life with my daughter. Despite numerous calls from my mother-in-law, I ignored them, letting the answering machine bear witness to her pleas. As I settled into my new life, peace returned, but 3 weeks later, my husband called. Initially ignoring him, his persistent calls prompted me to answer. We were supposed to be separated. What do you want now? I questioned. He requested financial help with hospital bills, claiming I had an obligation. Refusing to yield, I asserted my lack of responsibility. Threateningly, he mentioned canceling the divorce, to which I responded that I never intended to divorce in the first place. He insisted on family court mediation, asserting we had submitted a divorce application before the accident. I remained steadfast, confident that a handwriting analysis would reveal his deceitful claim. In response, he went even further, claiming that I had coerced him into writing the divorce papers. Additionally, he hadn't informed his mother of our official separation, and the thought of causing her more sadness troubled me deeply. According to him, my mother-in-law was devastated, expressing a desire to die every day because I wouldn't answer the phone. My husband bombarded me with guilt-inducing statements. Feeling a sense of obligation, I decided to visit his hospital room. However, my mother-in-law had gone home to rest. It was there that he handed me the hospital bill, a staggering $5,300. When questioned, he explained it was a self-inflicted accident and insurance wouldn't cover it. Just pay it for now. I'll pay you back later, he assured. Despite the exorbitant amount, I believed his words and paid the hospital fees. Upon presenting the receipt to my ex-husband, I faced cold stares from those around me. Patients accused me of being a terrible wife for not caring for my paralyzed husband, labeling me a heartless demon. My ex-husband, in a twisted version of events, had told the nurses that I abandoned him and went home. They treated me with disdain. Feeling uncomfortable and wanting to leave, a nurse unexpectedly came to take my ex-husband's temperature. To my surprise, he declared, "My wife has finally reflected on her actions and has decided to start taking care of me from today." I had no such intention, but as I tried to explain, he pulled me closer, whispering a threat. He could move and warned me not to make a scene, or he'd invalidate the divorce. I was instructed not to tell his mother the truth. Refusing to be manipulated, I clarified that I had only come to pay the hospital bills and had no intention of taking care of him. His response was chilling. He insisted that, if I wanted to live separately with our child, I would have to care for him for a while. He made a show of asking loudly, in front of everyone, if I would abandon him, painting a distorted picture of our situation, all in the pursuit of a peaceful separation. With no choice but to comply, fearing the fabrication of stories that could separate me from my daughter, I reluctantly began caring for my paralyzed ex-husband, Jeff. While sympathetic to his condition, my feelings were limited to that. Tormented by Jeff in the past, my only desire was for him to genuinely reflect on his actions. Over our 20-year marriage, he had subjected me to numerous terrible things. After about a week of caregiving, I noticed an oddity. I was the sole visitor to his hospital room. His mother was nowhere to be found. When questioned, Jeff evaded, suggesting it must be difficult for her to witness his condition. Suspicion arose. Did she not care about her son's state at all? Suspecting hidden truths, I unlocked his smartphone while he slept, revealing secrets he kept from me. Digging deeper, I unearthed even more shocking revelations. It became clear that he was using me for his convenience, and the only way to break free was to expose Jeff's actions and true character. Gathering evidence carefully, I resolved to bring him down thoroughly. A week later, his mother suddenly appeared to visit Jeff. Panicking, he questioned her unexpected visit, despite his earlier claims that she had no interest in coming. I interjected, reminding him that I was no longer his wife. Confused, my mother-in-law looked at me, and as I showed her a photo on my smartphone, she became flustered. The image depicted Jeff with another woman, evidence of his affair. Pressing him, he fell silent and fidgeted. Realizing the gravity of the situation, he tried to snatch the smartphone, but I handed it to his mother instead. Shocked, she scrolled through the photos, revealing unmistakable images of Jeff and his affair partner in intimate poses. The truth was laid bare before her eyes. Moreover, this is the second time you cheated. I contemplated staying married to you for another 4 years until our daughter becomes an adult, but I've reached my limit of tolerance. Yet, to resort to this method, it's cowardly. You're one to talk. After our divorce, you went on a drive date with your affair partner and got into an accident. Indeed, when I entered the treatment room where Jeff was taken after the accident, I saw her lying on a bed a short distance away. Witnessing them both, I felt unbearable and left the place immediately. At that time, Jeff's mother was quite shaken upon hearing her son had become paralyzed. So I thought it best not to give her any more shocks and kept silent. She had no idea the woman in the same treatment room was her son's affair partner. My son has caused you so much pain, Courtney. I'm sorry for getting the wrong idea and saying those terrible things to you. She apologized with a guilty expression after looking at the photos for a while. But ultimately, Jeff is to blame. He caused the car accident because he was distracted, cuddling with his affair partner while driving. Moreover, he crashed into a traffic light because he couldn't navigate a curve properly. Who told you that story? It was written in the messages between you and the woman you were with, I revealed. Did you think finding just the photos would satisfy me? The affair partner, who had been discharged from the hospital earlier, had been exchanging various messages with Jeff about the accident. As I read out their contents in front of Jeff, he murmured in a low voice, "Please give me a break," and looked down. "There's still so much I haven't said to you. The woman who was supposed to care for you decided to break up with you, right?" Eventually, the affair partner blocked Jeff on Messenger and refused his calls, leaving him unable to contact her at all. You want to cancel our divorce because you want someone to take care of you, right? But I can't do anything on my own. Strange, you seem quite capable of moving. I played a video I had secretly taken while caring for him, showing Jeff effortlessly picking up a smartphone he dropped on the floor after I left the room. "Jeff, what are you doing lying like this?" My mother-in-law's face turned red with anger, and Jeff fumbled for an excuse with his mouth moving but saying nothing. I spoke up in his place. "You want to live a comfortable life without working, right? Pretending to be unable to move, deceiving everyone around you, and relying on my income to support you. Isn't that it? On what basis are you saying such things? I didn't spend 20 years as your wife for nothing. I see right through you. This is goodbye, Jeff." After saying that, I quickly left the room. Jeff, panicked, suddenly stood up and walked after me to chase me. Although I knew he could move, his swift action surprised me. Stunned, he grabbed my arm firmly. "I can't believe you lied to this extent. Let go of me now." While shaking off Jeff's hand, I sighed deeply, and he looked awkwardly silent, unable to make a sound. Anger boiled inside me. As I glared at Jeff, I declared, "I won't listen to your excuses. Not only did you cheat, but you've also neglected me for the past 3 years, haven't you? It's all on you. It's your fault for not being attractive enough to keep me. Your defiant attitude is something I can't stand. Do you have any idea how much you've hurt me by coming home late at night, reeking of different women's perfume, without a word of conversation at home?" Jeff cheated on me 3 years ago for the first time, and since then, I've been treated like a maid. We slept in the same room, but I lived in a state of rejection. He bluntly told me, "A 48-year-old woman like you is no longer a woman." Later, he had an affair with a woman 20 years younger than him, who was with him during the accident. Shocked, I could hardly eat or sleep. My daughter noticed my deteriorating condition day by day and gently told me, "Mommy, if it's too hard for you, it's okay to get a divorce." For the first time, I discussed our situation in front of my mother-in-law. She turned to Jeff and sternly said, "Jeff, if you ever trouble Courtney again, I won't forgive you. Why won't anyone take my side? You brought this upon yourself, you fool. From now on, you're on your own." After giving Jeff a cold stare, she placed a gentle hand on my shoulder and said, "Do what you feel is right, Courtney. If you ever need advice, I'm here for you." Encouraged unexpectedly, I thanked my mother-in-law and then turned to Jeff, announcing that I had already moved out with our daughter Katie, as promised. "I'll divide the proceeds from the sale of the house and require you to pay $20,000 in compensation for your affair. Can we talk about that?" I coldly dismissed his plea, adding, "Oh, and don't forget to reimburse me for the hospital bills I covered and the $24,000 in child support for Katie until she turns 20. Jeff's expression immediately turned frantic, and despite seeking help from his mother, she firmly said, "I'm cutting ties with you, Courtney." Actually, I was driving with a suspended license, and my car insurance had expired. I didn't renew it, and now I'm being billed $28,000 for damaging a traffic light. Faced with this unexpected confession, I exchanged looks with my mother-in-law, but I felt no pity for him. "No matter how much you plead, my mind is made up. Don't ever call me again." As I was about to leave the hospital room, my daughter rushed in. Jeff immediately walked over to her, attempting to manipulate the situation. "Katie, you don't want us to divorce, right? It's better if Mommy and Daddy stay together, isn't it?" Katie, however, expressed her resentment, saying, "I hate you for constantly cheating and making Mommy suffer. You came here worried about me, right?" Jeff, shocked by his daughter's cold rejection, collapsed to the ground in a pitiful state. The other patients in the room, having witnessed the entire ordeal, apologized to me one after another. "I'm sorry we misunderstood," they said. I then noticed a nurse at the entrance of the room who also apologized, saying, "I'm sorry for making you feel unwelcome without knowing the whole story. No, I was deceived by him too. We've caused you trouble, and for that, we apologize. We'll be leaving now. Don't leave me, please. Goodbye forever." Leaving Jeff crying in the hospital, my daughter, my mother-in-law, and I left after his discharge. Jeff sold the house and paid the $20,000 in compensation for the affair, the $50,000 in property division, the $5,300 I fronted for his hospital bills, and the promised $244,000 in child support for Katie, leaving him almost penniless. With fines for driving without a license and the cost of the damaged traffic light, his future looks difficult. I'd also claimed $20,000 in damages from the woman he cheated with and received payment promptly. Now, Katie and I are enjoying our new life. She aspires to become a lawyer and is dedicated to her studies, and I am fully supporting her dream. The gentle hum of the air conditioning in my office provided a stark counterpoint to the tempest of thoughts swirling within me. I am Anna, a 28-year-old lawyer, and my present existence stands in stark contrast to the tumultuous nature of my childhood, a past carefully concealed even from those closest to me. The tranquility of my workspace was abruptly shattered by the insistent ringing of my phone, displaying an unknown number. Yet, an uncanny familiarity tinged with foreboding accompanied it. With a hesitant hand, I answered, my voice a mixture of professionalism and caution as I identified myself. Anna, it's your father, came the voice, laden with a nervousness that failed to quell my rising apprehension. A chill ran through me. It had been over a decade since I last heard that voice, a voice that once symbolized safety and love, but had since morphed into an emblem of betrayal and pain. Why are you calling me? I asked sharply, cutting through the heavy silence that followed his introduction. I'm in trouble, Anna, financially. I need your help, he pleaded, his voice betraying a crack. His plea, however sincere, stoked a fire of resentment within me. My help now? You need me after all these years? I retorted, disbelief and anger interwoven in my tone. Yes, I wouldn't ask if it weren't serious. I'm really in a bind, he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. You stopped being my father a long time ago. You can't just call me now and expect me to help. I responded coldly and unwaveringly. A pause hung on the line, an unbridgeable chasm of heavy silence. Anna, please. I'm still your dad, he implored, a feeble attempt at rekindling a bond long extinguished. The word dad felt foreign, almost jarring. Dad, you forfeited that title when you chose her over me, I declared, years of suppressed anger and hurt finding their way into my words. You're my daughter. I thought you? You thought wrong, I interrupted, cutting him off mid-sentence. You made your choice years ago, and now I've made mine. His voice, a mix of pleading and despair, persisted. Anna, I am sorry. I just need this one favor. The word sorry echoed hollowly in my office, a meaningless sound. Sorry doesn't change the past. I can't help you, I stated firmly, and with that, I hung up. My childhood, before the age of 10, was a period filled with love and laughter, a testament to the wonderful life shared by my parents and me in our small rented house. My mother, a beacon of joy and kindness, filled our days with warmth, while my father, once playful and caring, spent evenings playing games or imparting worldly wisdom. Our home was a cocoon of happiness, where each day brought new adventures and each night sweet dreams. However, this blissful existence came to an abrupt halt with my mother's untimely death. The house that once echoed with laughter and love turned into a silent mausoleum of memories. I vividly recall walking through the rooms, each corner a stark reminder of her absence. The loss was unbearable, not just for me, but also for my father, who had lost the love of his life. Yet the depth of his grief appeared to dissipate rapidly, much to my confusion and dismay. Within just a few months, he brought home Marissa, a woman destined to play a significant role in our lives. I vividly recall the day he introduced her, a day that marked the abrupt end of my cherished childhood. Anna, this is Marissa. She's going to be staying with us, my father announced one evening, his voice lacking the warmth I was accustomed to. I looked up at her, hoping for a hint of motherly warmth or friendliness, but found none. Her presence was imposing, her gaze cold and calculating. From the very first moment, I sensed a change in the air, a shift that filled me with an unexplainable sense of dread. Hello, Anna, Marissa said, her voice smooth yet devoid of genuine emotion. Her smile, instead of comforting, seemed to conceal something sinister beneath its surface. In the days that followed, the house felt different, as if the walls themselves were recoiling from her presence. The cheerful memories of the past faded, replaced by a lingering unease that settled in every corner. I remember scrutinizing Marissa, attempting to find something redeeming or kind about her. Yet every look, Every gesture seemed to be laced with an unspoken animosity. It was evident that she wasn't here to fill the void my mother had left, but to weave a new narrative, one in which I was an unwelcome part. As I watched her move around our home, a place that once felt safe and happy, I couldn't shake the feeling that her arrival signaled the beginning of something ominous. The way she looked at me with eyes that seemed to hide more than they revealed did not bode well for the future. The days following Marissa's arrival resembled walking through a nightmare from which I couldn't awaken. The house, once filled with my mother's laughter and love, now felt cold and unwelcoming. Marissa's presence cast a shadow over everything, turning even the simplest daily routines into a series of struggles. One morning, as I settled down for breakfast, a peculiar taste caught my attention. My food was unusually salty. "Marissa, did you put too much salt in this?" I inquired, my voice hesitant. "Oh, did I? It must have been a mistake. Just eat it, Anna. Don't be so picky," she replied, her tone dismissive, almost mocking. Such incidents became more frequent and malicious. I distinctly recall finding my clothes ruined after laundry. "Marissa, my clothes are all faded. What happened?" I asked, holding up my once favorite dress, now discolored and unwearable. She glanced at it and shrugged nonchalantly. "Maybe the washing machine is acting up, or perhaps it's time you stop wearing such childish clothes." Frustration surged within me, but I knew arguing would only worsen things. Feeling helpless, I turned to my father, hoping he would see through her facade. "Dad, Marissa is ruining my things. She's always mean to me," I said one evening, my voice trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My father's reaction was far from what I had hoped for. "Anna, you're imagining things. Marissa is doing her best to fit into our family. Stop causing trouble," he sternly replied, his words cutting deep. "But Dad, it's the truth," I protested. But he wouldn't listen. "That's enough, Anna. I don't want to hear any more of your accusations," he replied, his voice rising in anger. Each day became a battle, navigating around Marissa's hostility and my father's indifference. The home that once felt like a sanctuary now resembled a prison. I started spending more time in my room, trying to escape the constant tension that hung in the air. Living in that house of horrors, I felt alone and misunderstood. The safety and happiness that once filled those walls were replaced by fear and anxiety. Every day, I longed for the past, for the times when my mother's smile was enough to light up the entire room, a stark contrast to the darkness that now lingered in every corner. Living with Marissa became a daily ordeal of evasion and endurance, her hostility escalating from verbal jabs to physical abuse. It began subtly, pinches on my arm or twists on my stomach, always in places easily concealed under my clothes. The pain was sharp, a cruel reminder of my helplessness in her presence. I developed strategies to avoid her, constantly alert to her whereabouts in the house. I would take long routes to my room or wait until she was occupied before I moved around. Despite my efforts, there were times when she caught me off guard, and those moments always resulted in some form of pain. One day, while quietly reading in the living room, Marissa walked in and, for no apparent reason, pinched my arm hard, her nails digging into my skin. I winced in pain but bit back any cry of protest. She looked at me with a cold, triumphant smirk before walking away. During one of Grandma's rare visits, she noticed my cautious movements and the way I flinched when Marissa's voice echoed through the house. "Anna, is everything all right at home?" Grandma asked, her voice filled with concern. I looked at her, my heart aching to tell her the truth, but fear and the desire to protect her from worry held me back. "Yes, Grandma, everything's fine. Just a lot of schoolwork," I lied, offering her a forced smile. She seemed unsure but didn't press further. I felt a twinge of guilt for deceiving her, but I couldn't bear the thought of causing her any distress. That evening, as Grandma left, I saw Marissa watching from the window, her expression one of satisfaction. It was as if she relished the fact that she had control over me, that she could hurt me and get away with it. Her triumphant look was a clear message that she was the one in power, and I was just a helpless player in her twisted game. I retreated to my room, feeling trapped in a cycle of abuse and silence. The physical pain from Marissa's pinches and twists was bearable compared to the emotional turmoil I felt. School became my sanctuary, a place where I could briefly escape the misery of my home life. But even there, the shadows of my struggles at home began to seep through. My teacher, Mrs. Thompson, a kind-hearted woman who always encouraged her students, started to notice changes in me. One day, as I was handing in my homework, she gently grabbed my wrist, her eyes drawn to the bruises on my arm. "Anna, what happened here?" "These look like bruises," she said, her voice laced with concern. I quickly pulled my arm back, covering the bruises with my sleeve. "It's nothing, Mrs. Thompson. I fell while playing," I lied, avoiding her gaze. Mrs. Thompson didn't look convinced. "Anna, if there is something wrong or if someone is hurting you, you can tell me. It's important to speak out," she urged, her eyes searching mine for the truth. I wanted to confide in her, to tell her everything about Marissa and how I lived in constant fear. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, I forced a smile. "Really, Mrs. Thompson, I'm fine. It was just a silly accident," I insisted. She gave me a long, thoughtful look, then nodded slowly. "All right, Anna. But remember, my door is always open. You're not alone," she said, giving me a reassuring smile. I nodded, feeling a lump form in my throat. Her kindness made it all the more difficult to maintain the facade that everything was all right. As I walked home that day, Mrs. Thompson's words echoed in my mind. I felt a mix of gratitude for her concern and a deep sense of loneliness from carrying my burdens alone. The thought of revealing the truth about my life at home was terrifying. I feared the consequences, what Marissa might do if she found out I had told someone. That night at dinner, I was quiet, lost in thought about Mrs. Thompson's offer to help. Marissa noticed my silence. "Why so quiet tonight, Anna? Cat got your tongue?" she asked in a mocking tone. I just shook my head and continued eating, trying to make myself as small and unnoticeable as possible. After dinner, as I lay in bed, the reality of my situation felt more overwhelming than ever. Mrs. Thompson's concern had shown me that people did care, yet the fear of what revealing the truth might bring kept me silent. I was caught between the desperation to tell someone and the fear of Marissa's retaliation, a balancing act that I navigated every day. The day my teacher, Mrs. Thompson, decided to involve my father was filled with anxiety and dread for me. I sat in the principal's office, fidgeting nervously, my mind racing with fear about how my father would react. When he finally arrived, his face was stern, his eyes betraying a mix of irritation and embarrassment. "What's this about, Anna? Why am I being called to your school like this?" he demanded, his voice sharp. I glanced at Mrs. Thompson, seeking a semblance of support. Swallowing hard, I tried to find my voice. "Dad, Mrs. Thompson saw." "She saw the bruises," I stammered, feeling the weight of his gaze on me. Before I could explain further, he interrupted, his anger palpable. "Bruises? What are you talking about? Are you making up stories again?" Mrs. Thompson stepped in, her tone firm yet calm. "Mr. Smith, I'm concerned about Anna's well-being. The bruises on her arm don't seem accidental. We need to address this." My father's face turned a shade darker with anger. "She's perfectly safe at home, Anna. Are you spreading lies about our family?" He turned towards me, his disappointment clear. The tears I had been holding back started to spill. "It's not lies, Dad. Marissa, she's been hurting me." I managed to get out, the truth finally surfacing. His reaction was one of total disbelief. "Marissa, that's ridiculous. She's been nothing but kind to you. I won't have you slandering her with these accusations." "But Dad, it's the truth," I cried out, desperate for him to believe me. He stood up abruptly, his patience wearing thin. "Enough of this. Tell Mrs. Thompson you made it all up," he ordered. Obediently, I turned to the teacher and repeated his words. She nodded back and didn't say anything. Upon reaching home, without another word, he locked me in my room. Through the door, I could hear Marissa's voice dripping with false concern. I told you she's just seeking attention, she said. I sat on my bed, feeling a profound sense of isolation and despair. The one person I thought I could always count on had turned his back on me. The walls of my room, which had once felt like my personal haven, now felt like the walls of a prison. I lay there, thinking about everything that had happened. The pain of the physical abuse was nothing compared to the emotional torment of being disbelieved and punished by my own father. It was a harsh realization that the person who was supposed to protect and love me unconditionally was now the source of my deepest pain. The days following my confinement in my room were some of the darkest I had ever experienced. Trapped and feeling utterly alone, I realized that my only hope lay in my grandmother, my father's mother. She was a kind and loving woman who had always shown me affection, but I had never dared to burden her with my troubles at home. One evening, when I was sure Marissa and my father were occupied, I mustered the courage to call my grandmother. My hands were shaking as I dialed her number. "Hello?" Her familiar warm voice came through the phone. "Grandma, it's me, Anna," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Anna, my dear, how are you?" she asked, her tone filled with genuine care. Tears welled up in my eyes as I replied, "Grandma, I need help. Can I come and stay with you for a while?" There was a moment of silence on the other end. "What's wrong, Anna? Did something happen?" I took a deep breath, the words rushing out. "It's Marissa. She's been hurting me, and Dad won't believe me. I don't know what to do." I could hear the concern in her voice as she quickly responded, "Of course, my dear. You come right over. I'll take care of this." The next day, my grandmother arrived. She was a small woman, but her presence filled the room. She confronted my father with a strength that surprised me. "John, I'm taking Anna with me. She's not safe here," she declared firmly. My father, taken aback, tried to protest. "Mom, you can't just take her. She's my daughter." "Your daughter whom you failed to protect," she countered sharply. "I won't stand by and watch her suffer." Marissa tried to intervene. "She's just a child making up stories. You can't believe her over us." Grandma turned to Marissa, her eyes steely. "I know a scared child when I see one. Anna is coming with me, and if you try to stop me, I'll take this matter to the authorities." My father, realizing he was defeated, didn't put up any further resistance. As I gathered my things, I saw Marissa's expression change from defiant to defeated. Leaving the house with my grandmother, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I felt safe. The car ride to Grandma's was quiet, but her presence was comforting. Once we arrived, she turned to me and said, "You're safe now, Anna. You don't have to worry anymore." In my grandmother's house, I found the love and security that had been missing in my life. It was a haven where I could heal and regain my strength. The contrast between her nurturing home and the coldness of my father's house was stark. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could breathe again, free from the fear and anxiety that had plagued me. Years passed since I left my father's house to live with my grandmother. Her home had been a sanctuary, a place of healing and love. But time, as it does, moved on, bringing another wave of change. My beloved grandmother passed away, leaving a void that seemed impossible to fill. At the funeral, my father and Marissa showed up, their faces a mix of feigned sorrow and poorly disguised eagerness. It was clear they were more interested in what they might gain from her passing than mourning her loss. After the funeral, as we gathered at my grandmother's house, Marissa wasted no time. "Well, Anna, I suppose you'll be finding a new place to live now. This house and everything in it belong to your father now," she said, her voice tinged with barely concealed glee. My father nodded in agreement, already scanning the room, planning what to do with the house. But I couldn't help but smile, a reaction that seemed to confuse them. "Actually, that's where you're wrong," I said, the confidence in my voice taking them by surprise. "What do you mean?" my father asked, confusion evident in his expression. I took a deep breath, relishing the moment. Grandma left a will. She bequeathed the house and a substantial amount of money to me, I explained, watching as their expressions changed from confusion to shock. But you're just a child. I'm your father. I should be in charge of any inheritance you receive. My father stammered, his sense of entitlement clear. Marissa chimed in, her voice shrill. Yes, until you come of age, your father will manage your property. Good prospects. Their reactions were almost amusing. You don't give a damn about me so much that you didn't even wish me a happy birthday. I turned 18 a month ago. I'm legally an adult now. I make my own decisions, I stated firmly, relishing the look of realization dawning on their faces. My father's expression turned from shock to anger, then to a sort of desperate pleading. Anna, you can't do this. We're your family. I looked at them, memories of my childhood flooding back. You stopped being my family a long time ago, I said, my voice steady. Marissa stepped forward, her tone now begging. At least let us stay in the house. We have nowhere else to go. I shook my head. This is my house now. You'll need to find somewhere else. As they left, the weight of years of pain and neglect seemed to lift off my shoulders. I stood in the house that was now mine, filled with memories of my grandmother's love, and felt a sense of closure. The echoes of the past my father's call stirred remained. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling a tumult of emotions, anger, betrayal, and a sense of injustice. But amid all that, there was also a sense of strength, a reminder of the resilience that had carried me through the darkest of times. I believed I was enduring bullying from my mother-in-law, Pamela, but according to my husband, Steve, it was all in my head. Steve insisted that Pamela was merely educating me on how to be a proper daughter-in-law, asserting that I was skilled at playing the victim. When I confided in Steve about Pamela's actions, such as throwing my meals in the trash and deliberately dropping my laundry, he dismissed it as her way of educating me. To him, it seemed like a lesson in becoming a better daughter-in-law. I stood there, speechless, as Steve mockingly laughed at my perceived inability to see the educational value in Pamela's actions. My name is Laura, I'm 28, and I work as an office worker at a pharmaceutical company. Steve and I got married 3 years ago after meeting in college. Unfortunately, I lost my parents around the same time I graduated. As an only child, I felt destined for a lifetime of solitude. Steve, out of pity, introduced me to his parents, who initially welcomed me like their own daughter. After my parents' passing, I started living with Pamela in my in-laws' house. Initially, things were fine, and I enjoyed the warmth of my new family. However, after 3 years and facing difficulties conceiving, Pamela's attitude towards me drastically changed. Pamela would constantly remind me that, being the youngest in the house, I should take on the weekend housework responsibilities. Despite actively participating in household chores, Pamela seemed to harbor a growing dislike for me. She intentionally dirtied my freshly laundered clothes and made me redo the dishes. Additionally, she constantly nagged me about not providing grandchildren. Feeling broken inside, I confided in Steve about Pamela's behavior, hoping for understanding and support. However, Steve dismissed my concerns, attributing them to my imagination and overthinking. Despite Pamela never displaying her harassment in front of Steve, his refusal to acknowledge the issue made the situation even more unbearable. I found Steve's attitude towards the matter completely unacceptable. It felt like a twisted reality where Pamela was cast as the victim, and I, the supposed villain. This realization dawned upon me, leaving me with the stark understanding that I had no allies within the confines of my in-laws' house. Steve's disbelief in my claims only seemed to embolden Pamela, escalating her harassment from covert actions behind Steve's back to overt verbal abuse and mistreatment, even in his presence. During this tumultuous period, I discovered I was pregnant. Despite overcoming the challenges of morning sickness and entering a more stable phase, my heart remained heavy. Going on maternity leave only intensified the relentless harassment from Pamela. And Steve's refusal to acknowledge my struggles, coupled with his participation in belittling me alongside his mother, further deepened my distress. Even the joy that Steve initially expressed about our pregnancy gave way to him echoing Pamela's derogatory comments, labeling me as a woman who does nothing but eat and sleep. Knowing the detrimental impact of stress on the baby, I felt trapped with no apparent solution. In my desperation, the only person I could turn to for help was Steve. Determined to address the mistreatment and hoping for a change in Steve's attitude for the sake of our unborn child, I mustered the courage to have a serious conversation. Choosing a weekend, I approached Steve, who was casually relaxing in the living room. "Hey, there's something I want to talk about," I began, my voice laden with the weight of my experiences. As Steve lazily lifted his face from his mobile phone, I laid bare the cruelty I had endured from both him and Pamela. I implored him to stop ignoring the harassment and to consider the toll it was taking on me. Steve, seemingly torn between listening and indifference, stared blankly into the distance. When he finally refocused on me, his response was mocking and dismissive. "That's just you overreacting. What mom does isn't harassment or anything. Maybe mom is just trying to educate you to be a proper daughter-in-law. Why can't you understand that?" His words blurred my vision as disbelief and dizziness washed over me. As I unconsciously placed my hand on my stomach, a wave of realization washed over me. Looking down, I knew there was no way I could raise a child in the toxic environment of my in-laws' house. The mindsets of both Steve and Pamela would undoubtedly have a detrimental influence on the child. While their dynamics might seem normal to them, it was an unbearable struggle for me. My hand trembled slightly on my stomach, and an anguished cry echoed within me. But it seemed to fall on deaf ears as Steve responded with mocking laughter, pushing me to my breaking point. Expressing my concern, I said, "There's no way I can raise a child in this awful in-laws house. Your mindset and Pamela's will definitely have a bad influence on the child. It's hard for me, and I'm at my limit." Steve's unexpected suggestion to leave momentarily stopped my thoughts, but I quickly exclaimed, supporting my belly, "What are you saying? I'm pregnant." Steve, indifferent to the news, looked at me with a dry laugh, suggesting that I had nowhere to go if kicked out. His mocking voice echoed in my ears, fueling my anger. Overwhelmed by my intense gaze, Steve looked slightly displeased. In response to his laughter, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I pulled out a large Boston bag from the closet and began packing clothes and valuables. Steve seemed to believe that even if I claimed to leave out of stubbornness, I'd ultimately have no choice but to return to his parents' house. Pamela, hearing the conversation, added her perspective, stating, "It's your fault for not following our house's rules." With no intention of ever returning to my in-laws' house, I asserted my decision to leave. Once I settled down after leaving, I planned to send divorce papers, and muttered to Steve and Pamela, who continued to laugh unpleasantly. With that, I had made up my mind to raise this child on my own, ensuring they would never see the face of my unborn child. A year had passed since I made the difficult decision to leave the in-laws' house. Successfully navigating single parenthood, I gave birth to a girl and embarked on the challenging journey of raising her alone. For the past 3 months, I hadn't returned to the in-laws' house, and I promptly sent divorce papers to Steve, seeking to sever ties. Although the divorce was processed without issue, my request for child support remained unfulfilled. Contemplating future negotiations with Steve, I realized the need to involve a lawyer. In an attempt to lift my sinking spirits, I looked up at a towering high-rise in front of me. A sign proclaiming "Model Room Open for Viewing" caught my eye, and I decided to explore the possibility of purchasing a condo before returning to work. The distance between my current residence and both my workplace and the nearest child care center posed inconveniences, prompting a desire to settle down in a more suitable location. Fortuitously, I possessed ample funds to secure a condo. After registering at the reception on the first floor, I was guided to a room on the top floor. Riding the elevator to the 50th floor, I was surprised to find that the person assigned to guide me was none other than Steve. His presence caught us both off guard, and his discomfort was evident. Despite his current job in a securities firm, I learned he had switched professions since our marriage. Despite the awkwardness, Steve proceeded to show me around the top floor. Although his words were gentle, his glances betrayed his curiosity about my unexpected presence. The room itself was impeccable, boasting an ideal environment for single parenting, close proximity to my workplace, an underground connection to a child care center, and luxurious amenities such as a courtyard park and a 24-hour supermarket. Despite the discomfort of our unexpected reunion, I decided that this apartment met all my criteria for a stable and convenient living situation. My decision surprised Steve, who seemed taken aback, but I came prepared to sign a contract immediately if I found a suitable place to call home. Steve hesitated, and to my surprise, he didn't bring out the contract, leaving me in suspense. As I was about to question him, Steve's lips quivered, and a mix of emotions played across his face. His expression wasn't angry or jealous. Instead, it seemed accusatory. There's no way a single mom going through a divorce can afford the top floor of a high-rise. Steve finally spoke, his tone filled with skepticism. He seemed to suspect that I had caught the attention of a wealthy individual or was involved in some dubious job. I took a step back as he closed in, denying any such assumptions. No, I just sold my family home for more than I expected, I explained. After leaving my in-laws, I had moved back to my family home, which was in my name. The house, left to me by my deceased parents, was too large for me alone. Before the baby was born, someone expressed interest in buying it. However, I clarified that selling the family home alone wouldn't cover the cost of the top floor of a mansion. Steve's skepticism was justified, given the age and condition of the house. Despite its flaws, the buyer, a wealthy individual fascinated by my father's water garden hobby, offered 5 times the market value for the property. The buyer intended to have a gardener reshape the garden to his liking. I continued, explaining that the sale included a living allowance, and I could now afford to live in an apartment nearby without financial worries. Hearing my story, Steve's eyes briefly sparkled, and his attitude shifted. He humbly apologized for his earlier judgment. "I'm sorry about what happened. Can we start over?" Steve confidently extended his hand, seemingly sure I wouldn't refuse. However, I didn't take his offered hand, asserting my independence. "I can raise my child and live well without you. I have no desire to live with someone who looks down on others," I declared firmly. In that moment, Steve's face transformed into anger, and he glared at me. Unbeknownst to me, a colleague with the contract appeared behind Steve. Perhaps curious about our extended conversation, I glanced past Steve to greet the colleague who had joined us. However, Steve appeared oblivious, his focus unwavering. The colleague's face turned pale as Steve continued his derogatory remarks, asserting that a woman being rich was inherently wrong. Suppressing the colleague's attempt to intervene with a look, I'd addressed Steve directly. "Is that all you wanted to say? So you think you can look down on me now that you're rich? You were better off as a lifetime servant in your husband's house." I sighed, turning my attention to the employee standing frozen with a stack of contracts and documents. Expressing my reluctance to make a significant purchase from a company that employed someone with such demeaning views, Steve finally turned around. The employee, realizing he was being addressed, rushed over and profusely apologized, almost scattering the documents in his haste. Encouraged by his boss, Steve hesitantly joined in the apologies. "I'm so sorry. My subordinate was incredibly rude to you. Come on, you apologize too." Urged by his boss, Steve seemed to grasp that things were going badly. They apologized repeatedly, but at my command, I halted them. "I won't buy it anyway. I'm sorry. I'll look at other apartments," I stated, and their expressions turned to despair. Despite liking everything about the apartment, I refused to spend my money with a company employing people like them. Leaving them bowed, I exited the room without anyone seeing me off. Alone in the elevator, I didn't look back as I walked away, searching for another model apartment. Later, I learned through Pamela that Steve had not only lost the contract for the top floor of the high-rise, but also faced a pay cut and demotion due to his verbal abuse towards me. His subsequent resignation marked a challenging period, with Steve struggling to find another job while grappling with alcohol and gambling issues, all while Pamela took care of him. In a chance encounter at the supermarket, Pamela expressed her regrets, pleading for me to remarry Steve and come back. I responded promptly, advising her to leave the house if it was unbearable. Pamela's face fell in despair, and I felt a slight sense of relief. Choosing an apartment in a different building, I returned to work, putting my child in daycare. The money from selling my family home was more than enough to support my child, but my love for my job led me back to it. With a recent promotion, I now lead a fulfilling life, successfully juggling work and childcare.